OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
Well, it's bang on 7:30. It's Monday morning. It's Ger and Dan McDonnell with you this morning. Dan, how are you?
I'm good, Ger.
For as a celebration, I think we've sent Owen to the game tonight between Liverpool and Manchester United. He's going to be sending stuff back over the next 24 hours. I don't know if that's punishment or if that's whatever it is.
This sounds more like a sort of an indulgent farewell tour of some description, isn't it? It's like Tony McCoy's last season as a jockey or something. He sort of went everywhere he went. Like, you know, it was people sort of, I don't know, sharing him with compliments. And
the Liverpool and Man United fans sometimes not as hospitable as that, though.
No, but I mean, okay, maybe it's a sort of a farewell tour to get a little bit more sort of life experience under the belt. I mean, I presume he's going to encounter more of that where he's going. So this is it. Like, you got to sort of take yourself out of your comfort zone sometimes. He's not going to get the love he's going to get from sort of well-heeled Irish rugby fans or whatever. He's slightly different vibe.
Exactly.
Or Kerry around his people.
Yeah.
You know, it's going to be different here. Yeah.
This is preparation for the derby in Mexico City that he's going to, which I can't remember the name of the two teams. Is it Chivas and somebody?
Oh, God. Is he got? Yeah, I mean, it's funny. Like, I'd sort of think I'd be well enough versed in, say, football travel, and I'd be up for experiences. But some of the Mexican football stuff is pretty intense. I think you know, you do probably need to have your wits about you a small bit there. I presume it is Chivas and their rival.
Luckily, he won't stand out in that crowd at all.
No. Well, I mean, can you not claim to be one of those sort of the Irish origin sort of people that are... There's a couple of them out there, right?
Yeah.
You know, but yeah, that's actually true. Yeah, I think that's like invest in a hat.
That South African prop and Canelo Alvarez are the perfect examples for him to go, oh no, what are you talking about? I'm one of you. His Spanish is perfect. And before we get into the performance rankings this morning, am I going to jinx this by saying things are going exceedingly well for Stephen Kenny at the moment in terms of the game time that a lot of young players are getting, the confidence they seem to be playing with, the numbers. There's a few obvious examples at the top end who aren't getting as much game time as we'd like, but other than that, it seems like every time the team news comes through, it's like, and then the goals are flowing.
Yeah, I think what it is that the age profile of the ones that are doing well is very encouraging. Like, if you look at the top end, I mean, it may well be that there's only going to be maybe, I don't know, 7, 8 Irish players involved in the Premier League this year. I mean, Conor Coventry is on the fringes of the West Ham team. He even played for them during the week, and sort of would have expected him to go out on loan, and maybe he will. But like I say, Seamus Coleman has come back from injury, so hasn't really been involved yet. Matt Doherty is easing his way back in. So there's some of the ones who are like sort of 29 or 30 upwards. Actually, Doherty's 30 now. And for them, like for a couple of them, it's been a small bit of a struggle, but it's more so the younger lads you're speaking about there, really. That, I mean, Bazzunu's now a Premier League player. Travers, Premier League player, going to be a very overworked Premier League player. I don't think his reputation has been hurt by anything that's happened so far, even though he's conceded quite a few goals. Nathan Collins, exceptionally good. I know he was done by Harry Kane on Saturday, but he's still mixing it in that company. But Andrew Mowabedelli is back. He was excellent for Norwich on Friday, by all accounts. And then, I mean, Obafemi's got a goal. Probably still feels very. Troy Parrott, who is now playing regularly in the Championship level, probably needs to add goals still, like, to some of his performances. But the fact is, he previously played in Championship level at Millwall on loan and wasn't getting great reviews. Seems to have had a much better start to life. Ogbene is his second crack at the Championship as well. First time round, he was sort of a fringe player, or not the player he was now. Rotherham have started to play him as a striker like Ireland do, and he's scoring goals. So that's definitely a positive. And then, I'm probably forgetting one or two.
Darragh O'Shea was named captain by West Brom and played well in his scoring. Not that that's his job, but you know, he has talked about his leadership ambitions, and they've given him the captaincy, and you're like, okay, this is good news. Yeah,
and like Darragh O'Shea is someone with sort of a great temperament, and it wouldn't be a huge surprise that he'd probably be spoken about in those terms. And in a weird way, I think Darragh O'Shea is maybe 24 now. He's definitely born in the 90s, unlike a lot of the other these sort of 2000 kids that we sort of have, which is still mildly terrifying in some ways when you look at what they were born after, you know, in a lot of cases. But I mean, you do have this, and it's giddy talk, but you do look at this sort of, say, back three potential of, say, a Collins, Immobile Badele, Darrow, Shea are going to be around for a long time. And even the thing about it is that you just assume with the vagaries of sort of the game, someone's going to be unlucky. Like there's always someone who gets an injury or it just disappears off the radar at some stage. But there's actually a sort of a degree of depth there to cover it. And to be honest, like attitude with all these guys wouldn't be concerned at all. It might be with one or two. I mean, we've Aaron Connolly off in Italy trying to sort of to be reborn and sort of struggling to get in just yet. Actually, Liam Kerrigan, I should mention, actually, this is another one. Liam Kerrigan, who's from UCD, who joined Como in Serie B, whereas Cesc Fabregas is one of his teammates and Dennis Wise is the CEO, and it's a little bit of a crazy story, but he came off the bench for his league debut last night and scored.
I didn't realise Dennis Wise was the CEO of Lake Como.
Yes.
That's a nice gig.
Dennis
That's a nice
Wise
part of the world
is the
to live
CEO. Because we had Liam Kerrigan on our podcast last week with Johnny, and he was just saying, is Dennis Wise there much day to day? And he's like, I think he's spending a bit of time between there and London, and he has some link up with a sort of an Indonesian football thing. So he's living a sort of a varied and full football life, but there's something going on in Como that they're able to sign Fabregas, just drop Fabregas into the dressing room. Mark Bertram is there, who was the manager of Waterford last year. He's sort of as a coach,
right? And
he's basically the link that led Liam Kerrigan, this kid from Sligo, to end up playing for Como and scoring on his debut in Serie B last night, which is. It's beautifully random.
It is. I mean, we should all go for like a week to broadcast from there just to make sure that, we get the full experience.
You might just be like plugging into my thoughts here, Ger. I mean, you've got sort of Kerrigan and Como, and you've got Aaron Connolly down in Venice, and you're thinking Abankwah and Festi Ebisele, Udinese Ebiselli's been involved so far. Kevin Zeffi, Inter Milan. I mean, you could just do a month there. Like that's the thing. Like maybe Owen should abandon his Mexican plans
and live in Italy.
Just go to Italy.
Yeah.
Just dial in with dispatches on Irish players over there every so often. Worst ways to live.
The Cardiff left back, Egan.
Joel Egan, yeah. He hasn't been as involved this season thus far, and Mark McGuinness is another centre half who played at the weekend. But there is like this sort of depth in the defensive areas, which is and the one you mentioned left backs, because longer term that is probably one position where Ireland are a little bit older. With Enda Stevens has been injured, James McLean is again, he's had a sort of resurgence, but Robbie Brady is the one that suddenly sprung back to life. That he joined Preston. I don't know, like, did it lead news bulletins when Robbie Brady joined Preston? Was it just one of those things where it was like, to me, it was a couple of paragraphs in a way. Robbie Brady's trying to relaunch his career at Preston. But there was an element of believe it when you see it, probably after the injury luck he's had in recent seasons. But he's been excellent so far. He's scooping man of the match awards. He's playing left wing back, I think, sort of primarily. And all of a sudden, he's probably roared straight back into the Ireland picture. And again, he's only 30. Like, he's not... and I don't, does that surprise people? Does it seem like he's older, been around for longer or not? But he's basically lost the prime of his career. That sort of mid to late 20s. He was about 24 when he got that goal in Lille. He joined Burnley around that time, but I think within a year he got a serious injury around the time of that World Cup playoff. I think after the World Cup playoff with Denmark, which was 2017, he got the injury the following month, and he hasn't been the same since. But tentatively, he seems to be back to being a very good player now.
So that's all a very rosy picture in terms of the players playing at the level they're playing at. One kind of caveat to this is Jason Knight's still playing right back for Derby, a division lower than we think his talent merits. And I don't know, I mean, there's obviously 10 days left in the transfer window. It doesn't seem, I haven't heard anybody linked with him. I haven't seen any signs of him going. So maybe he just is going to play right back for a season, and he'll be, he'll understand the physicalities of that division. Maybe that's what he needs at this stage.
I don't know.
Think so. Like,
I'm not really sure what's going on. There was some suggestion last night that Derby were not willing to sell, that there had been more interest, and I'm not sure about sort of the quality of the source, but it was definitely going around last night, sort of local channels in the UK. But I think the crucial thing about Knight is that his contract is up at the end of the year. So you kind of wonder, is there some kind of, you're always looking at what games are potentially being played around this. It's impossible to me to think that a player out of contract at the end of the year, that they're just going to let him go for nothing next summer. He's younger, so there'll be compensation things and so on. But you kind of wonder, is it going to be is it kind of a tactical thing going on here? Where in January maybe he just goes and they cash in then, or the suggestion was they're going to try and open contract talks to him. I know Derby have a bit of investment, but I don't know. Like Stephen Kenny a couple of weeks back was doing a thing in Offaly, and he actually spoke about how last year he had quite a few League One players in the squad, and this year he didn't think there was going to be any until Conor Harrington joined Derby. It was almost left as though a given that Jason Knight would be moving on from Derby. He didn't even suggest, well, Jason Knight's obviously there too. And now we've ended up in this situation. But I don't know. I find it bizarre that a move hasn't been done. And I'm kind of wondering, is it just sort of brinkmanship of some description going on here that late in the day in the window something suddenly does happen?
Well, fingers crossed it does. Okay, OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish your day. Here's what's coming up between now and 10 o'clock this morning. Samuel Luckhurst is going to join us at 10 past 8 for the view from Manchester United side of things. The sports page is at 8:35. Phil Thompson's after that. For the Liverpool side of things, ahead of Liverpool Man United tonight. Ronan Mullen's going to join us in studio at 10 past 9 to talk about the end of Anthony Joshua as a contender at heavyweight level, perhaps. And what comes next, whether or not the Usyk Fury thing is real. And then we'll play out with Kenneth Egan's analysis of it as well. But at 7:41, time for us to get into the Gillette Labs performance rankings.
That wasn't an All-Ireland winning performance.
Probably should have won the game based on their second half performance.
Is it a step too far to say it was the performance so far of the World Cup? Maybe not.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
I'm scratching my head. That performances was just lacked that intensity.
So every Sunday evening we ask you for your suggestions on our Instagram stories, and the opportunity is there for you to win a Gillette Labs starter pack. And if you agree or disagree with Dan's selection, that doesn't really matter. You'll go in the draw either way. Dan, where are we going?
I think we're going to start with Chelsea in the red. I think. It was in terms of the Premier League weekend. There was some good stuff. Like the Newcastle Man City game was excellent yesterday, but. And maybe just Manchester United are lucky they don't play till Monday night, because otherwise they're just going to belong in this sort of red across the season. It gives them a little bit of a break.
This is their customary spot.
Yeah, so they've stepped aside for TV purposes and they've let Chelsea slip in there. But Chelsea were pretty good against Spurs last week. Really, when you consider the probably the pre-match chat about the power ranking, almost it felt like sort of Spurs are like trending up and Chelsea maybe not. Then they were excellent. They should have won, and then concede like a bad goal. I know there was controversy around sort of various aspects of it, but then they go to Leeds and get done 3-0, and in such a way that like you're looking at some of the commentary after and chatting to people who are sort of big into Chelsea, and they're sort of wondering, is this team potentially a little bit, I don't know, mentally fragile or a bit soft? I think Leeds outran them considerably as well, and they were missing Kante, and there's a couple of sort of elements of Kovacic, like there's elements of mitigation there, but looks like they sort of got it outworked and got done. Koulibaly sent off, and it's just one of those worrying ones where you do have like a great buzz around Arsenal and Spurs, winning games without being tremendous, or picking up points without being tremendous. But Chelsea had a bit of a weird sort of summer. Everything's still happening late. They're still trying to sign Fofana now and various things. But you'd be a little bit worried about them now.
None of the teams who win leagues most of the teams who win leagues tend not to have these where you throw in a 3-0 defeat at a team like Leeds, and where it comes in a situation that you collapse because of errors. If there's errors, or if there's a mistake or something happens, then you roar back into the game because you're title contenders. It's very early and we're not overreacting. As you said, the Spurs game, they played really well, but I thought they were going to be really good this season.
Yeah, I think there seems to be this question about leadership and what do they have? Like Koulibaly was a big sign, and he gets, he's sent off. Was Rudiger a big part of their? Maybe not everyone's cup of tea, but are they missing a certain steel or something? As you say, you can't really mention it without sort of the Mendy mistake, which sort of gave Leeds a 1-0 head start, but then they conceded straight away, or almost straight away afterwards. And that's the thing. You look at other teams like Liverpool with sort of 10 men, they still come back and get a draw. The City won yesterday where they're maybe not at it, but yet they could still have won that game against the sort of, Newcastle are better than Leeds, and City can still win. And like Chelsea, seems like a couple of things. Tuchel was on about the travel was complicated or something. They had some issues with the travel at
Are they not allowed to pay for it anymore? All that's gone. All their excuses are gone, right?
They seem to get something wrong on the travel end of things anyway, or some issue happened. I think the players and the staff had to travel separately or something. I mean, they were going to Leeds, like they weren't going to sort of North Macedonia. But I don't know. It's just sometimes you look at a team and you think, yeah, there'd be worrying signs on how they lost the game. Like as you said, like you will lose games, but it's how you lose them, and they seem to lose it in a way that would sort of raise a little bit of questions. Early stage of the season, all those caveats apply, but still. A little bit alarming.
Kante's on his hamstring and he's also 31, so like he might not be available for 36, 37 league games this year. So you're going to have to deal with situations where you somehow make up for that, and maybe they just don't have the players at the moment, and maybe that's why they've been linked with a load of extra players, and the window isn't done, as we know, and their owner seems to be very keen on shopping as much as he possibly can and telling everybody he exists, and that's the whole point, I guess, about being rich, Well,
and this is it. I mean, it's almost like some things never happened at Chelsea. Like it's back to, it's just Bowley sitting in the same seat almost as Abramovich, and it's like it's a different character. It's a new series of a box set or something where they've injected a bit of life into the Chelsea thing here, when it looked maybe a little bit more grave in terms of where they were a couple of months ago, but. It's a bit like the Manchester United thing at the moment. If you're running around at the end of the window trying to get a lot of things done, it's rarely a picture of health. I know it's sort of exciting, for fans in some ways, because there's all these possibilities and names and stuff, but it's rarely a sign these days that sort of things are going especially smoothly or especially well. It doesn't really paint to like a good season. Are we seeing the clubs you're expecting to have a decent season this year been linked with sort of multiple names or going all around the houses at this stage?
No.
Not really, no.
I did think that that the end of the Spurs-Chelsea game was like an important moment for Thomas Tuchel, where we kind of saw a bit more of his personality and who he was. But maybe I got that completely wrong. And maybe his team were looking at that going, oh, just sit down. Just sit down. What are you doing? What are you doing? We know what you're like. Because the response from them has been to throw one in at Leeds. Leeds is obviously very intimidating, great atmosphere. It's great to see them back in the way they were. The stadium looked absolutely sensational, completely rocking yesterday, and they've got a very different style of play, and they've got a really interestingly put together group of players. And I don't know what's going to happen at Leeds. So
maybe they're better than what we're saying either. Like maybe we're being disrespectful. In some ways, we're underplaying the Leeds contribution to it, and I'd be pretty happy for Jesse Marsh in some ways. But I know what you're saying about Tuchel. He's sort of people always have this Chelsea shelf life in their heads. That there's always there's this sort of cycle of like there's an early peak and then over time, and that was maybe an Abramovich era thing people had in their mind. But maybe I don't know.
Maybe it's in the DNA of the club.
Well, he's an intense character, right? So maybe again, I don't know. Maybe he's just bringing in some players that he wants to sort of mould the team and his personality. But there's always that slight danger. It is a club that has a history of people getting sick of the manager's voice very quickly as well too.
All the way back to Hullett and Hoddle and that era. It actually predates Abramovich if you think about it. It's just that they got success when Abramovich was there. So we'll see. We'll see exactly what happens and whether or not they sign any more players. But so they are definitely in the red. Also in the red is a Belarusian referee.
Yeah, so Shelbourne were knocked out of the Women's Champions League yesterday. They're in the playoff round because they had the good win during the week, and then they were playing the Icelandic side yesterday, Valur, and they lost 3-0. And I suppose it's one of those things, you see the result on paper, a 3-0 scoreline, and you think, well, it's like, I think for the Women's National League teams, they're they are amateur, trying to compete at a sort of a decent level. It's always going to be hard for them, and you sort of think, yeah, they've met their match there. But then you sort of read some of the reports afterwards. You saw that there was a Shelbourne player sent off after the final whistle, Amanda Budden. You saw there was 6 yellow cards to Shells and 0 to the opponent, and you're kind of wondering, is there a little bit of a backstory here? And the the FAI send out their official report, which I think goes through the official channels, and there's no real mention of the officiating there because you can't. It has to be very straight down the line. But there was this thread then that was put up on Twitter last night by a user, Evan H, I think, and he posted it out of because this game was available to watch on a stream, and a series of clipped decisions during the game, which helped to explain why Shell's players weren't shaking hands with the officials at full time. And there wouldn't be, I don't think they'd be regarded as a team, let's say, for petulant sort of over the top behaviour in such a way. And you're always conscious of green tinted glasses coming to this. And I mean, they did lose 3-0. It wasn't 1-0 with a sort of a 93rd minute offside goal or something. But it's out there, and there did seem to be a series of very questionable decisions went against them during the game from the Belarusian official. I see some of the players tweeting about it afterwards. Again, I don't think that would be standard behaviour from them, that it did seem to be a particularly eye-openingly bad display, including a penalty shout that led to one of the goals at the other end, a couple of very dodgy offside calls for a one-on-one situation, and it does seem like things could have been different if they got a little bit more, I don't know, a little bit more rub of the green from the officials. People talk about this look of the Irish thing, right? It doesn't always extend to our sports teams.
I think it's ironic, right?
I mean, I'd like to think it's ironic.
I know. I mean, is it not? Is it not because we never got luck? Is that? I mean,
is that the origin of it?
I don't know.
Someone needs to tell Americans, when Shane Lowry wins a tournament or something by 6 shots, and it's luck of the Irish or whatever. It's
that's lucky leprechaun nonsense, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. But remember the one years ago where I think it was at Firestone, where he did get a ridiculously lucky bounce on the 18th, and he did get a bit of luck, and then it was cut. Well, there you go. There's that famed look of the Irish that they speak about coming to the fore again. But it does seem like Shells, without sort of making it into this classic hometown, it's a disgrace what happened here, because there was a thread posted up of decisions, and one or two of them, it was maybe not that bad, but there was enough of a body of evidence there to suggest that they were rightly...
He's got about 15 clips.
Yeah, there's a lot of clips. It's you sort of... if you're bringing that PowerPoint presentation to the table on the basis of 2 or 3, you're it's a bit weak. And as I said, within them, there's isolated ones that maybe weren't that bad, but the collective looks pretty pretty poor.
Yeah. So hopefully, hopefully there's an investigation into what the hell happened, and everybody gets some truth. It's difficult sometimes to talk about these things and what you think might have happened or what might be going on, and we'll just leave it there. But I've retweeted that if you want to get onto Twitter and have a look and make up your own mind about whether or not Shells were given a fair crack of the whip last night. So that is our last one in red. Belarusian referee. The PGA Tour is in amber here. Speaking of the look of the Irish, so Shane Lowry almost made the final 30 for the final week of the money fight that they have at the end of the season, but Adam Scott got up and down from a greenside bunker to I think he finished 31st in the list, and so he's not going to make it for next week now. No, I mean, there's 1 or 2 injury doubts, but I don't know if he can get in if Zalatoris or Cameron Smith or someone pulls out. I'm not sure if that's the case, but yeah, Scott got an amazing up and down at the last. He was in 2 bunkers on the hole, and he managed to. He was standing in a bunker for his second shot, and Larry sort of went sitting there waiting to go through. But I don't know. The end of the PGA Tour is a bit it's a bit of a money grab in a way. They have this sort of convoluted format where the top 30. They go to the Tour Championship next week, and I think it's Cantlay is Scheffler, who leads. He starts off at 10 under on Thursday, and the field goes down to even money. So you start from your position or whatever. But I put PGA Tour in the amber because again it was another decent tournament at the weekend. Sort of good leaderboard. Cantlay, Scheffler, Xander Schauffele, a few other names you mentioned there. They're all decent enough names. And you can't help but avoid this live golf thing, which is in the air all the time. And the tournament last week was preceded by this big players meeting where Tiger Woods flew in, and it was some of the sort of the big dogs in the PGA Tour got together to say, what are we going to do about this? What are we going to do about this threat that apparently there's 7 more players about to go? All the sources who've been right about stuff before are now suggesting there's going to be 7 more departures after the Tour Championship next week. I think Cameron Smith's assumed to be in it, and Leishman, and there's a little bit of
guessing going on around some of the others. But the PGA Tour's response, it does appear from the sort of briefing coming out from the weekend, is that they're going to introduce a little bit more of a tighter calendar, but including a large number of smaller field, no-cut events for their top players, which to me leaves yourself open to a small bit of grief when you consider that part of the argument for the traditionalist almost argument against Liv was these non-competitive no-cut events. You're taking away some of the competitive edge or some of the traditional edge from golf, the thrill of making the cut or whatever, to create smaller exclusive tournaments, which again is going to keep a certain degree of power in the hands of a few. And they are going to throw more money out to the lesser players. I think everyone is going to get maybe upfront money at the start of the year that some of their prize money is deducted from. But that's a little bit of some of the live contracts, they seem to be that way structured as well for the lower players. You get your upfront money and your prize money is deducted from it. So I'm just not so sure about this this broader PGA Tour strategy in this sort of fight that's ongoing, that whether this is going to, I don't know how this one's going to play itself out.
They're going to do a deal at some point. That's what's going to happen.
Do you think?
I do. I think that it's inevitable that they're going to do a deal at some point, because too much money for both of them to actually coexist. At some point, the PGA Tour will have less money than Liv, because Liv have endless money. That's the way it's going to work, right? They've decided that sports washing really, really works. The fight on Saturday night, the Newcastle game at the weekend, that was an absolutely sensational game of football, right? With some of the best thing we've ever seen. And it's sports washing. And everybody's forgotten about the original reason that Man City are now owned by who they're owned by. And ultimately, reading the New York Times during the week, Saudi Arabia are no longer a pariah state. I mean, it was 18 months ago that they were a pariah state, and then Joe Biden's fist pumping them, and they need their oil, and everybody loves Saudi Arabia. And they're like, it's very progressive. Women can do some stuff that women can do in other countries.
Apart from use Twitter, maybe.
Ignore the beheadings and the Twitter stuff, and they own a bit of Twitter, Yeah,
and they're doing stuff. I mean, they're doing stuff with the Ladies European Tour and the LPGA, which isn't as contentious, but I'm still not so sure about the I mean, I totally take what you're saying there about the sort of the Saudi status and the hypocrisy that can accompany some of the Liv outrage. But in saying that, the Liv strategy seems to be about a takeover, and this idea that they desire compromise, a lot of people question that. They question the extent to which some of this stuff that the PGA Tour are doing here as well. They're on about changing its non-profit status and effectively giving some of the players a form of equity, in the tour, including Tiger Woods. And there's a suggestion, is there some Tiger power play going on here, that all of a sudden Tiger comes in, not so much as sort of the saviour of golf, but also someone who ends up owning half of the property afterwards. And players will almost end up with a sort of removing some of this sort of I don't know, the bureaucratic obstacles that were there before, some of the paperwork obstacles that were there before, can now let a sort of a cabal of the better PGA Tour players make a load more, which sadly in a way backs up part of Phil Mickelson's outrage that the players weren't getting enough out of it, even if that was. I mean, analysing Mickelson's motivations will take it down a completely different path. But it just strikes me that the PGA Tour's had a bit of a revival, the great Sunday events. I love watching, particularly the Sunday nights. And part of it has been the PGA Tours where you sell the dream a bit, that you'll have this week where, you'll have the big names up there, but you'll have some unheralded sort of ranked sort of 1, 2, 5 or even lower guy shooting for it. And if you introduce all these exclusive sort of no-cut events, you'd imagine they're going to want the bigger players to play in that, and they're maybe less likely to play in some of the other events where they rub shoulders with the...
Or could miss the cut,
Yeah, and that to me is in danger of... I don't know. I'd be a little... I'm popping them into amber there because I'm not so sure. I think they were probably winning a degree of the PR battle, and I felt anyway in many ways, and some of this stuff now is sort of, maybe you're right, maybe it does come to compromise, but I'm still not sure if Liv really want that.
I don't know if the compromise means that the two tours merge. I actually don't think that's the end compromise, which I probably did at the start. But now I think that like the compromise would be we can share these players for a certain number of events, but you'll be a nominated Live player and you'll be a nominated PGA Tour player, and that they'll coexist so that the big weeks of Live won't be the big weeks of the PGA Tour, because ultimately the amount of money that they need to generate from the TV companies and the money that they need to generate from sponsors and then ticket sales and all that kind of stuff is the stuff that is going to give them profitability into the future. And if the PGA Tour ends up being owned by Tiger and Rory and a bunch of the players, then it's going to be in their interest to do a deal to make sure that the best players, that Cameron Smith can play in at least the four majors and enough events to on loan from Live. Like there's probably a very easy way to do that, you know.
Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like it's got pretty rancorous though in some ways. That I just don't know. There's a feeling that after there's a feeling that after this next exodus that's coming of whoever is in it, the sort of 5 or 7 players, that they're not expecting a huge amount more. It feels like they've maybe reached their, and I mean the Live thing is like 48 golfers as well, so there's not a scope for them to sort of find that much more. I'm not so sure. Like some of that court case was very interesting recently. I totally see why people are saying, and it's almost an element of experience that says they're going to come to the table here and it's going to be a compromise. But I'm not sure. It's got quite personal. I'm not sure if that compromise happens with Greg Norman there. Maybe it's that he gets thrown overboard at some stage and that's part of the compromise. But I don't see it in the short term. Maybe over the longer term.
In America, they seem to be able to put their differences aside in the name of money. It seems like a lot of those court cases are very rancorous until a deal is done. Everybody's standing in the court case, and the court starts going, it's just, that was all false.
But I don't know, these Live guys, can they just assimilate back into the field? Like when there's some depth of feeling towards, like
Sergio.
Maybe it'd be terrific to watch. Like it could be actually fascinating to watch the assimilation. But I kind of wonder if it's too far gone for that.
I wonder, do the makers of the golf documentary series on Netflix, do they also need to make a simultaneous one with the Live people so that it's not just the PGA Tour, that it's actually Live and PGA Tour, and we get to see what the truth is being said?
And we need to figure that the Saudis better not have a stake in that Netflix series. I mean, the whole thing is thrown then. If
you wouldn't be terribly surprised.
Probably got 5%.
Irish athletics are in the green after a sensational week, really. Like every night there was something worth watching, and every night we were generally performing either PBs or season's bests or medaling. It was incredible.
It was, and to me, like, again, as someone who's like, you know, like a lot of people, you sort of dip into it around the major tournaments, and it feels like with the Irish athletics team, it's mainly like the Olympics, of course, that people dip in. They maybe find it hard to medal or to be competitive, and then there's a knee-jerk, oh, this is terrible. And yet you see across the last week that the level they're performing at is incredibly high. You know, Mark English last night sort of winning a medal when it wasn't necessarily something that was being talked about hugely across the day. You know, it wasn't as if there was a massive build-up. It was almost like this is almost a bonus that was sort of slipping under the radar at the last minute. And you've had all these performances across the week, which again, I see Cathal Dennehy writing in the Independent today in our paper again about sort of sending a message to Jack Chambers off the back of this, that again, like a lot of these athletes, they're being funded to various degrees, but some of their coaches are doing it for free. Their sort of hands are tied behind their back almost relative to some of the countries they're competing against. And I mean, it strikes a chord with me. Someone who probably covers, say, League of Ireland, and I'm in Hungary last week, sort of watching Shamrock Rovers trying to go and compete with these forces. And we have such a focus of naturally at times in this country, and everyone's a part of it. Media's a part of it. Everyone's complicit in it to some degree. Like you have this focus on the major sports that sort of sustain our news cycle for so much of the year, and yet there are athletes there performing to a pretty high level who clearly feel rightly that their performance is the time to maybe make a little bit of noise and say, well, if we had a little bit more to work with here, just think what we could do.
The other thing I think that's is interesting is that they all, it seems like the vast majority of them have made themselves available before and afterwards for all the interviews, and they're talking about themselves and they're talking about their sport, and they're excellent ambassadors. So whatever it is that whoever has set the tone for that, like Ciara McGean is always available. Whenever you want to talk to her, she's always available. And we talked to her after the Commonwealth Games, and we talked to her, she'll be on again later on in the week. And like the current crop of ambassadors that they have all got their own different backstories, which, like in athletics, when you're a sole trader like that, you have to overcome adversity again and again. Anytime you get injured, you're not really able to generate funding or win races or improve. And they all have that in their locker, and they're all able to talk about that, and they're all also able to talk about the people and the support network that they have. But as you rightly point out, most of that support network is doing it on a voluntary or an amateur basis. And if you just think about like what good quality coaching does, if that coach is actually able then to go on and invest time in developing and get even better, all of a sudden that's a force multiplier, because they can coach more of these athletes and explain to more people, this is what I do with this athlete over here who you've just seen on TV representing Ireland and reaching a final or setting a personal best. And I don't know, it feels like there's a few blockages in that system that could fairly easily be sorted out. So definitely in the green this week, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, and they have to win their way into the news cycle sometimes, you know, and that's why it's right when you're doing well to make a little bit of noise. As much as some people would just like to enjoy the moment, they know there's a bigger picture behind it, I think, as well.
Shamrock Rovers in the green. Is the league title done and dusted?
Pretty much, yeah. I was in Tala last night for the game against Dundalk, and like I was in Hungary during the week where they were sort of turned over by Ferencváros comfortably enough on Thursday, and you're thinking this is going to be dangerous for them on the Sunday against Dundalk. If Dundalk had won last night, they'd be a point behind, and Rovers are heading into a situation where kind of playing this Thursday, the second leg, maybe not the most important game, but they're playing 6 more Thursdays in a really congested sort of club football schedule, and that would mean 6 Thursdays means they're going to play 6 games on Sundays, 2 games a week. They could be vulnerable. But that win last night, I mean, they didn't have a huge amount of the ball. I think they had like 30-something% possession, but they won 3-0 because they just clinically executed a game plan. And as Stephen Bradley said afterwards, they want a little bit of a breathing space going into these, because they want to give this Conference League a real go. And if you have to stress in the back of your mind that you could lose your title, which is the Champions route is what allows them to effectively get into that Conference League, because you get way more chances as a champion in Europe. You can afford to lose, and you get through back doors, and you know you get to where you want to be and get that money. Like this idea of their dominance, really, the starting point has to be winning their league every year. So if a European run cost them winning the league, they're sort of back to sort of not back to square one, but certainly not a million miles from it. So like I think I heard you speak about it a couple of weeks ago when they got through or whatever. It's not a case that they get into a group stage football and straight away everything is perfect and they're going to be hit the ground running, and like it's part of like this year, and then you get back again next year, and you try and get back again next year, and it's going to take time. But the whole underpinning it is winning their league, and the fact that they've managed to win that game last night, it makes it a good week for them, even if it didn't go their way in Hungary.
It feels like the difference this time is that the architecture and apparatus around the club is much more developed than it was whenever any of the other clubs have made runs like this in the past, even Dundalk under Stephen Kenny and Rovers when they were there the first time. Like they were brilliant achievements, but they were certainly of that moment, as opposed to this is now kind of, this is the top of a pyramid at Rovers, where it looks like, I'm sure everything's not perfect, but their youth system is producing players that they're unfortunately sometimes losing to League One, as we've seen, and they're also able to buy the best young players in Ireland. Not to gloss over that either, but that actually, if they get into the group stages this year, it's not a fluke. It's not like a mad, oh look where we are. It's like, well, that's what we expect. That's our new base camp.
Yeah, it's not like previous teams. I think it was the story, like a brilliant manager and a group of players executing something, and like part of the coverage is, isn't it amazing they've done this? Like I think Shamrock Rovers, the first time they got in the group stages, they were training, I think, in the AUL or just in the process of like moving towards Tala, actually not even training in the area. Whereas now they've like, you know, hundreds of kids up there. You're right, like during the week in Hungary, they brought on 2 17-year-olds in the second half, Justin Ferazai and Gideon Tede, and they may well be sold, like, you know, at a very young age, but did they have a couple of players gone overseas, not just Bazunu, who's made over £3 million for the club subsequently, but they have a couple of others like Sinclair Armstrong at QPR and a few others that are going to probably earn money for them in the coming years. And people at Rovers would make the point that actually and people at other clubs as well will be quick to tell you that some of the better players they have at the moment, say 16, 17, they were taken from other clubs at a particular stage. But they do have their first generation of Rovers players coming to the boil now, as in ones who were there from 8, 9. And they have this transition year programme, which is sort of a full-time football programme that they're going to have more kids going on. And you're right, like there's something beneath the bonnet that's sort of that's going to make it a little bit more sustainable. And in a couple of years' time, I mean, their first team at the moment is still very experienced, recruited from elsewhere. Other people will rightly point that out. But I think you're going to see a little bit more of a gradual introduction of their own players and a little bit more control over their own destiny, rather than being vulnerable to, say, one bad year screwing you, which was always the danger for an Irish club. I think they're sort of moving beyond that point to a level where they can almost probably withstand that bad year, and that in itself is like it's a weird measure of progress, but it is one that is relevant.
Can I ask, and not to, I mean, we could spend an hour on this now, but
yeah.
Is what they've done copyable by Derry, for example, or anybody else who has that level of owner who would have the money and the ability to soak up some short-term pain, knowing full well that actually there is an industry now if you actually can harvest the best young players and sell them to England, and that will give you that sustainability for the down years when the team doesn't actually win the league or qualify for group stages in Europe, that actually you can have a 10-year plan, because this is the fruition of 10 years of thinking really at Rovers.
Yeah, it is a copy, but it is a good question. I mean, like Derry is a weird example because they're not actually subject to the Brexit stuff over there. So they had their 16-year-old Trent Coney-Doherty is an exceptionally talented ball against. He went to Liverpool as a 16-year-old as he can under sort of the old rules. But I think the broader point is, I think people are getting around their heads on, no, it's really important to like have a training ground, you know, like let's have a training ground. I mean, it doesn't sound like the most original thought, but I mean, if you're hiring training facilities, you know, and sharing them with like a Leinster Senior League club or something like that, like how do you actually build a club? Like your team is always going to be the jerseys and the manager and stuff that's pretty transient. And other clubs are trying to do it, but the funding piece obviously becomes particularly relevant here. And this is why, like, I would be aware that anything that's going on as regards, say, discussion for like third party support, like this is the area they're going to put it into. I think it's going to be the academies, but you're right, like it takes a long period of time. Brexit has provided this opportunity, but there's a little parallel here with the athletics situation. Like we are looking for control of. We're taking control of a degree of youth production here, and yet we have coaches doing it for free, volunteers doing it for free. Like that catches up with you over a period of time.
But it's always worth talking about, right? Yeah. If you want to get in touch this morning, 0879 180 180 is the WhatsApp number. OTB AM is live each morning with Gillette Labs for an effortless finish your day. That is this week's performance rankings. If you want to get into them, you can just get onto Instagram and you can be in with a chance of winning a Gillette Labs starter pack. Samuel Luckhurst is on after these ads. First, here's Jamie Clark talking to Aisling O'Reilly about whether he will return to the Armagh Gaelic football panel.
So you're in with Cross, so Armagh. Is there any conversations with Kieran McGeeney, or would you rule out going back?
Not at the moment. Obviously, Kieran and I have a good relationship. Look, Armagh's Armagh. They had a decent year last year, and like from my point of view, I want the best for Armagh, and you know, whatever decision I make is for the best of Armagh and not for me. So I'll definitely be putting Armagh first when it comes to making that decision.
So it's never say never. See how you go across and see how you're playing, sort of thing.
Exactly, and if it comes to, you know, the commitment thing, whether it's I might have to miss a couple of nights because of this, if it's not able to happen, then you know, obviously, you know, I mightn't be able to commit. But look, it's a long season, and you know, the championship's a long way away. But we'll see what happens.
And so what was it like watching them? Obviously last year, that game against Galway, quarter-final, it went to extra time, penalties in the end. You went to the game, you're saying? Yeah, I went to all the games, just to get a feel for Croke Park as a supporter and see what it meant, you know, to the Armagh fans as well. It was kind of nice. The Galway game was quite intense, but yeah, look, obviously I would have preferred to play, you know, with the crowd, and I suppose it was a lovely day. The atmosphere was great, but look, they had chances to win it, and I think that's when you're playing at that elite level, you don't look at it as in that was a great game. I look at it that Armagh should have won, you know.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
The Football Pod. with Paddy Andrews and James O'Donoghue.
I heard through the grapevine that Paddy Andrews was happy enough that Sean O'Shea had put the ball in the net.
Was?
He did. He goes, leave him kick that. Leave him kick that.
I'll admit that. I was thinking, not within the conditions, the time of the game. He's nearly 60 metres out. And I'm just thinking that he's not kicking that. But there's the little bit you're going, he might.
Subscribe to the Football Pod on the OTB Sports app now.
Things that put people off on a first date. Showing up late and getting your name wrong? Always a great start. Looking at their phone more than you? Hello? Someone who only talks about themselves. Oh, really? God, aren't you great? Look, no one said dating is perfect, but at GoDating.ie, we promise we'll always try and find your perfect match. Because somewhere out there, there's someone for you. And GoDating.ie will help you find them. Yes, even you, socks and sandals guy. Go on, go for it with GoDating.ie.
If your business relies on a van, that wouldn't sound good. But this does. Get up to 75% off van insurance. Now available in FBD branches nationwide. FBD Insurance. Support. It's what we do. 75% no claims discount based on 5 years claims free. Available on new van policies. Used for farm or business purposes. Terms and conditions apply. Underwritten by FBD Insurance PLC. FBD Insurance Group Limited, trading as FBD Insurance, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
Right, let's talk about the game between Manchester United and Liverpool. I'm delighted to say Samuel Luckhurst is with us to help preview the game and maybe talk a little bit about what's going on in the background to it. Samuel, good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning. Very well, thank you. Thank you for having me on again.
We were just chatting in the ad break about how repetitive this story is and how difficult it is to find something new to say about how badly run Manchester United are at the moment. And yet, maybe there's a little bit of green shoots with the signing of Casemiro. What's your instinct about the direction that we're heading in at the moment?
It really is difficult to keep up at times. In that, when the Casemiro reports emerged last week, immediately you thought that's not a goer. That feels fanciful. 5 times Champions League winner, joining Europa League fodder, a team who've just had their worst season in decades, and yet 3 days later, United announced that they've signed him. It's pretty clear what the main source of motivation is for Casemiro, but because United are desperate, because they are panic buying now, they're in a situation where anything goes, they'll accept anything. In the case of Casemiro, he's got great pedigree. He was brilliant in the Champions League final in May against Liverpool. You look at those Champions League final triumphs, he's done it twice against Jurgen Klopp's teams. So there are a lot of positives from it. I don't think it's necessarily a massive coup. I mean, ultimately, United have overspent a hell of a lot on someone who, although not aging, is their peak years are probably behind them. And although he's got the World Cup coming up, so he needs to maintain rhythm there, he's on an obscenely long contract for a 30-year-old. And this is another common theme with Manchester United, in that they can't help but dole out contracts that are far too long to players, whatever the age, whatever the pedigree. And previously, that was cited as a flaw of the past regime. That was on Ed Woodward's watch. That wouldn't be happening again, but it is already happening. It's still too early to judge these players who are getting new contracts, these new signings. Lisandro Martinez is already on a 6-year contract, effectively, and you've got pundits like Jamie Carragher saying that he can't do it in a back four in the Premier League. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops. But as far as the management and the players are concerned, as dreadful as it has been at the start of the season, some of them are going to need time, and understandably the focus has been on the ownership over the last few weeks or so.
That focus on the ownership, we've actually seen that before, but it never really leads to anything. Is there any sense that it's different this time, or is it chatter that people are trying to manifest into reality as opposed to something real?
It's a good question. The fact that Sir Jim Ratcliffe his spokesman has come out and clarified that he is interested in buying Manchester United, which a lot of people have suspected for quite some time. Ratcliffe did an interview with the BBC earlier in the year where he practically said he would be, but that United weren't for sale. And it's still unclear if they are indeed for sale. I mean, the Glazer family are never going to comment on this. They're hermits, really. They're extremely reticent, extremely coy about their plans. There's not a lot of transparent communication. Joel Glazer has spoken to a handful of Manchester United fans on the a fans advisory board, but I believe those fans who go on it have to sign a non-disclosure act. So nothing or very little comes out of those meetings, which again I don't think is particularly progressive for fan club relations when the co-chairman and the main owner and the man who's mainly involved with the running of Manchester United on a day-to-day basis. I mean, believe it or not, Joel Glazer does hold daily calls with people in Manchester about what's going on over here and what's the latest crisis. But it's not in the United fans' interest for these discussions to be held in such a discreet manner. But that's part of the agreement that the club and these handful of fans settled on after the Super League last year. And I just think that although there has been a lot of noise over the last week, thanks to Elon Musk firstly, and then as I said, Sir Jim Ratcliffe did declare his interest. We have seen this before, maybe not to this extent, but the Glazers are very stubborn. They can be very obdurate, and there is safe distance between them and Manchester United supporters, which is the Atlantic Ocean. Joel Glazer has not been to United game in nearly 3.5 years. It was a jolt to see Avram Glazer and Edward Glazer at the Brighton home game 2 weeks ago. They pick up their semi-annual dividend. As dreadful as Manchester United have been, and as as a brand, they are not. They're not as great as they used to be, but they are still a very lucrative cash cow for the Glazer siblings, and they have no problem taking their semi-annual dividend.
You mentioned the point earlier that the long contracts were supposed to be the hallmark of the Woodward era, and yet here we are, and the same thing has continued. Who's making that decision now? Is that Richard Arnold, who was actually supposed to, it looked like, separate the football and the business, or is it John Murtagh who's saying, yeah, actually the right thing to do here is to give Casemiro 5 years and to give anybody who's coming in a longer term contract than is generally the norm at the moment in the football world?
Arnold would always have to request sign-off from Tampa and the family, and mainly Joel Glazer on a signing or a new contract. And you look at the picture last week, United had one of their worst defeats in maybe 50 years at Brentford, getting in a Real Madrid midfielder who nobody really expected to leave Real Madrid this summer, who only signed a new contract at Real Madrid last year. Signing him on a £70 million deal, which it could eventually rise to, is good PR. It's a midfield signing. United amazingly had gone 4 years without signing an out-and-out central midfielder. So at the end of the day, it's clear who had who over a barrel there. I mean, Casemiro is getting potentially a 5-year contract if that +1 is extended. There's not another elite club in Europe that would have paid 60 million, rising to 10 million, for a midfielder who had fallen down the pecking order at Real Madrid. And there's no way another elite club in Europe would have made that player one of their highest earners. That's the desperate position Manchester United are in. The positive for United is that they are signing a defensive midfielder, and they are signing one of the best defensive midfielders. Whether he can maintain that level in the Premier League in a midfield that really is non-existent, that doesn't have any half the passing quality of the midfielders he was accustomed to playing with at Real Madrid. He had two of the greatest passers in probably the game's history, in Toni Kroos and Luka Modric either side of him. At United, he could have Scott McTominay and Fred either side of him on a weekly basis. In the case of Fred, he at least is familiar with him. They do play regularly together for Brazil. They are their starting midfielders. They actually keep Fabinho out of the side. But speaking to an agency contact last week, they flagged that Casemiro's running stats are not particularly great, which, again, it's not a great surprise. La Liga is quite a sedate pace. Real Madrid are bound to control most of the games that they play in. I was told that his running stats are worse than Scott McTominay's, but that's to be expecting, that the Premier League is a much more frenetic pace. And also McTominay can be so careless with the ball, he ends up having to chase shadows.
Samuel, just to clarify, the mood on the ground in terms of the game tonight, I mean, what are we expecting in terms of the atmosphere and the sort of the talk of protest or unrest, or like what's the sense of what's going to happen here tonight?
It's difficult to predict. It's going to be quite virulent outside the ground. Ultimately, this is a sold-out game, so despite pleas on social media to empty Old Trafford and for it to look quite sparse, I think that would be a surprise in that it's one of the biggest games in world football. The demand to be at this game is still extremely high. I think because of the fixture and what happened with the Super League protest in May of last year, some parallels have been drawn with that. But in that case, when United fans were clear, a militant faction was certainly hell-bent on getting that game postponed. It was easier to do that then because it was a game that was played behind closed doors. Tens of thousands will be driving or travelling to Old Trafford tonight with every intention of clicking through the turnstiles. A lot of the protesters outside will be ticketless, which isn't a problem whatsoever. Some supporters are just disenchanted with following United. They don't want to pay the Glazer family. That's perfectly principled, and I think a lot of the fans who are outside the Norwich game in April during those quite captivating protests were ticketless, and it's bound to appeal to them. But as far as tonight goes, I don't think the Casemiro signing is necessarily going to dilute the protests from those who've organised this. But unfortunately, these protests, since they restarted or started by a particular group in April, they have been quite ineffectual. And when the attempt to walk out on a certain minute, I think during the Brentford game or the Chelsea game towards the end of the season, you had the banner up and the minute was still listed on the scoreboard that they were still actually inside the stadium. So I don't think they're ever really going to unsettle the Glazers. When the green and gold protest started in 2010, which did have genuine momentum and really did become a movement for the 4 or 5 months that it was sustained by the supporters, the Glazers actually became more present and attended more games at Old Trafford because they felt as though they wanted to front up and show that they could take on these supporters and that they wouldn't be cowed by them. That's not going to happen now. But as I said, Edward Glazer and Avram Glazer were at the Brighton game the other week, and they had little or no problem getting into the stadium. Whereas when the first time the three siblings visited Old Trafford after the takeover, I think it was Joel, Avram and Brian, they needed a police escort to get out because there was an angry mob outside.
Things have definitely changed on that front. To talk about the football for a change, which I know is kind of remarkable, that there's going to be a match that happens. What do you expect from Manchester United tonight, and what do you expect from Erik ten Hag tonight?
Well, the players want a more pragmatic approach, which is almost an admission of defeat that they don't have the skill set to execute his instructions or his game plan, which is why United need more signings beyond Casemiro, which is why Ten Hag has been targeting players he's familiar with. I mean, Casemiro, United tried to say he was high on their list of midfield targets, but I mean, sometimes you think, do they think we were born yesterday? That they were holding out for Frenkie de Jong all summer because the manager really wanted him. And in the end, they've just had to walk away because they didn't make any headway there in the last 6 weeks because of the wage deferral issue that de Jong has got at Barcelona. And really, from the outset, that was a deal that was fraught with problems because de Jong never really wanted to join Manchester United. So they've had to rejig their plans. And although Ten Hag insists that the plans haven't changed at all, de Jong and Casemiro are markedly different players, and the way that midfield was exposed by Brighton, then even more so against Brentford, a defensive midfielder was always going to be non-negotiable. But it's not a coincidence that United have moved with uncharacteristic alacrity to get Casemiro in. Unfortunately, he's not going to be available tonight. He's still not been fully signed up. So it's going to be fascinating to see what Ten Hag does with the midfield, because he does not have the personnel there to stymie Liverpool. Liverpool have got some injury issues. They've not looked quite themselves in their first 2 games. Van Dijk has looked particularly vulnerable, which is unlike him. So there's some hope for United in that sense. But as far as the Liverpool midfield goes, and Thiago not being available, the 3 midfielders who lined up in the 5-0 thrashing of United last season are available, and they are still a far better team than United. it's a game that loomed rather ominously at the start of the season for United fans. After Brighton and Brentford, it's looked like a terrifying prospect. But the fact that Liverpool haven't looked quite themselves, and it can't get any worse, you would think, from United's perspective, after that Brentford game, that does offer United fans some hope. But again, I can't settle on a team where I think that United could absolutely certainly take on Liverpool toe-to-toe or give them a good game. It's a big test of what Ten Hag does and whether he does actually compromise his own ethos and principles and rein in what he wants to do, because United are coming up against a team that have had their number in recent seasons.
Like, what is compromising his principles in this game? Like, what is an approach that would represent that?
Well, he tried to suggest that playing out from the back was naive at Brentford, which it certainly was, and that he wanted United to draw them in and then go long. And I think Ten Hag, he told us in pre-season, I mean, there's more than one way to skin a cat, effectively, in that he's not just hell-bent on playing beautiful total football or playing the Cruyff way or the Ajax way. I think he's more than aware that in the Premier League you're going to come up against various opponents, and you will have to adapt your style from time to time. And he showed at Ajax that he's not got one fixed formation. His first good team there, they played in a 4-2-3-1. His last good team that won the league title last season, it was more of a 4-3-3, and they had the focal point with Sebastian Haller up front, which is why it's always been a bit perplexing that people suggest that Cristiano Ronaldo can't play in a Ten Hag team when Sebastian Haller did that Ajax last season. But with this game tonight, he can't play McTominay and Fred, because that was exposed last season, and it was exposed in the very first game of this season. There are players in the attack. Bruno Fernandes has got a hell of a lot worse since he, unsurprisingly, got a new contract in April, a contract that only added 1 year onto its expiry date, but he got a big pay rise. Wayne Rooney said in his Sunday Times column that he wouldn't start Marcus Rashford. There'll be a hell of a lot of United fans that agree with that, because Rashford has just looked out of sorts for 18 months, it must be said now, at club level. But the alternatives, the strength and depth, it's just not there. So Ten Hag is limited as to what he can do. If Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was in this position, he would probably go to a back three, and yesteryear he'd have ground out a pretty commendable draw, which was the case, I think, in the October 2019 game when he was under the cosh. When that knack of getting big performances when he was on the rocks deserted him last season, that's when it spiralled, and he ended up getting the sack by United. Whether Ten Hag actually follows the Solskjaer blueprint will be interesting, because if he does, I'm sure there'll be some grumbles from supporters that will start to feel, well, is this guy any different or different enough to what Ole Gunnar Solskjaer does? Because Solskjaer said himself last season he did not want to play with a back three. He didn't want to have this almost defeatist air about United going into games, but felt that he had to, because they were coming up against such better sides in his final games. Liverpool and City were two of the teams he came up against in his last 4 or 5 weeks. It's still, I mean, Ten Hag is nowhere near that territory yet, but the circumstances are somewhat similar going into this Liverpool game, because United are coming off the back of such a dreadful defeat to Brentford. So whether he's more pragmatic or not remains to be seen, but that's something that the players would favour.
He could easily pick 3 at the back, right? That might get him out of some of the short-term issues around Maguire and Martinez height, and give him a little bit of betting in opportunity. And would a 0-0 draw tonight not be something that Man United fans are like, well, we've steadied the ship?
Well, I think they would snap your hand off at a 0-0 draw, just because it would halt the negativity that has started since the first weekend of the season. I can't quite remember the last time Ten Hag would have played with a back three, but certainly when Martinez came in, it was a question to ask, just because it was a huge investment in a defender. They'd made huge investments in far more esteemed defenders in recent years, in Maguire, who is still a world record for a defender, his transfer fee of 80 million, and Rafael Varane coming in last year. But Ten Hag was quite clear to us in in Melbourne during pre-season that he saw Martinez as someone to come in and strengthen the team, and Maguire was the first choice. What's interesting is that Ten Hag is giving serious consideration to dropping Maguire tonight. It's still unclear if he has taken that decision and followed through with it, but it is something that's on his mind given how poorly Maguire has started the season, and Varane has to come in this evening. If he does go with the back three, I don't think it would be a major surprise. I don't think he wants to crush Martinez's confidence so quickly. Martinez, of course, can play as defensive midfield, which might be a stopgap option for tonight's game, just because United are going to need someone to hold the fort there against one of the best attacks in football. Okay, Liverpool won't have Jota, or who I believe is still injured, and obviously Darwin Núñez is suspended, but the firepower they have is still pretty ominous for United, and they put 9 goals past them last season. So United are going to need that extra security. They can't be as loose as they were against Brighton, never mind Brentford, when you had Christian Eriksen effectively doubling as a defensive midfielder, which was an experiment that not many people could remember from his Tottenham days. And as is often the case with such experiments in football, it didn't work.
No, it definitely famously it didn't at this stage. Some quickfire questions around transfers. Is Marcus Rashford for sale? Is there a possibility he leaves in the next 10 days?
United would say no. I think it's too much of a stretch for him to go in the next 10 days. PSG did meet with his brother, but they already feel as though they're being used as a negotiation tactic by the brother to get Rashford a new contract at Manchester United, which a lot of United fans would probably laugh at the prospect, because like a lot of players, pretty much all the players who are technically out of contract next year but have the +1 option on their deals, United fans would argue that none of them deserve a new contract. And that's the invidious position United are in, because they're either going to have to give him a new contract, they're going to have to sell him, because letting Marcus Rashford go on a free is just something that they can't entertain. I think he would be 26 at that age. I think with Pogba, it was just about understandable because of the way it had unravelled, but I don't think it would get that course. I don't think the fans would turn as virulently against Marcus Rashford as they did with Paul Pogba.
Is Jadon Sancho going to be an Erik Ten Hag player, do you think?
I think he's probably one of the players who's got a better chance of it, but one of the issues I certainly had with him when United signed him was that he was used to an environment where there was no pressure, and he's gone into the most intense pressure cooker environment in football probably. And during pre-season he was excellent, he was United's best player, but then as soon as the competitive games started, as you've seen, he's regressed, and that might be the issue with Sancho, in that I don't think it's an issue of ability, but being in that pressure cook environment at Manchester United, it rumbles players very, very quickly. And last season, it rumbled almost everyone in that squad. And so far, he's not really shown that he's got the nous to cope with the pressure. But ability-wise, I think he's certainly one of the players who's likelier to thrive under Ten Hag.
Cristiano's cryptic Instagram post about "I'll tell the truth in 14 days," was that like because he'll be somewhere else, or was that because the window will be closed and it'll be too late for anything to happen? Did you have any read on that, and does it have any implications about where he's playing football in a couple of weeks?
Well, an interview's not been promised to me or any of my colleagues, so I'd be fascinated to see who does end up having that discussion with him. But I think that's the most the clearest hint yet from him, that he wants to leave. I think it's the closest he's ever going to come to publicly saying that he wants to leave United anyway. But it doesn't really help matters. Gary Neville said it last week. Why has he got to wait 2 weeks? He can give that conversation now. If he wanted to have that discussion now, that would be ending the debate or any sort of rumblings over his future, because I think it'd be confirmation that he is staying. But he's deciding to wait until the transfer window closes, which would again indicate that he's holding out for Jorge Mendes, his agent, to make the impossible possible and get him an agreeable move somewhere.
I was going to say, it's more than likely he'll interview himself on one of his own channels, but actually he could get Jorge Mendes to interview him, and one of those hard-hitting...
Find someone.
Yeah.
It's just a perfectly normal Manchester United story, isn't it, to have a player promising a tell-all interview in 2 weeks?
Yeah.
This is
when he
normal.
won't be a United
normal.
player.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
You must feel like you're somehow in an episode of Succession most of the time, Samuel.
Either that, or it's certainly in recent weeks. It's felt like I've started writing for Private Eye, writing about a bid for Marko Arnautovic, and United comparing him to players from yesteryear who they deemed successes, who were actually not successes. I mean, Arnautovic was likened to Laurent Blanc as a pragmatic short-term signing, as if, I mean, for people who can't remember, Laurent Blanc was a world-class player when he was at Inter Milan and Barcelona. He was certainly not at Manchester United. It was one of the worst pieces of business that Sir Alex Ferguson ever did in selling Jaap Stam and bringing him in. So it has felt extremely surreal. And as I said, with the Casemiro deal, that just seemed fanciful. I think, speaking to colleagues, we all thought, well, yeah, come August 31st, Real Madrid will be announcing that Casemiro's got a new contract. But amazingly, United have got this one over the line, which again just highlights the desperation at the club.
If you had to guess, how many more signings will there be in this window, do you think?
I'd say a minimum one, but they would want two. I think they want a backup goalkeeper still, which is not a particularly... that would not be a significant signing, but I still think they will get another forward in, just because they do not have established depth in that squad. And the Ronaldo situation, they need someone who's going to offer them a different attacking outlet. But if it is Anthony, there's no guarantee that he's going to be a reliable source of goals. And that's the problem they've got with the forwards who Ten Hag settled on in pre-season, Martial, Sancho and Rashford. None of them are dependable goal scorers. The only dependable goal scorer in the squad wants out.
Samuel, great stuff. Thanks a million. Enjoy the game tonight. Cheers.
Thank you very much. Nice to be on.
Samuel Luckhurst there giving us his thoughts on the game tonight. What do you think's going to happen?
I think you can debate it and you can find reasons to believe Liverpool won't win, but you just come around to the conclusion Liverpool are just going to win, aren't they?
Well, I mean, they just have been so bad in the two games. Well, sorry, they haven't. They just couldn't score.
Well, they were dreadful
against
Fulham. They were like very bad against Fulham. If you're talking about Liverpool, like Manchester United has been established bad. Like Liverpool did play okay in parts against Palace, particularly with 10 men. So you sort of just think they have to. Like, you're looking at the names on the crest as opposed to like the football teams on the pitch. And if you look at the football teams on the pitch, you're thinking, well, surely Liverpool win this game. But like you say, most weeks with Liverpool and Man City, they'll win most games. And Manchester United are just one of the...
Good chance for Liverpool to get those 2 points that they dropped back.
The momentum was back in the title race, in week 3. Yeah, but I mean, it is true. Like, City weren't going to drop any points, and now they have. So you have to redraw all our boundaries.
Carl Mullaney is with us at 8:42 this morning. Carl, good morning to you. How are you?
How are you, lads? How's it going?
What's the crack? It's we didn't even mention Sam Bennett. Sam Bennett can't get in the green. 2 back-to-back stage wins in the Vuelta.
That's probably my fault, to be honest. Yeah. I mean, he totally should be in there, of course.
It's just
maybe you just need more. Like when you have the athletes and people doing stuff, you need more green and less red.
Maybe we could just retire the amber.
Yeah.
It doesn't really exist that much in Irish traffic lights anyway.
It's true. It's gone very quickly. It's basically a half green.
Yeah.
You just drive through anyway, don't you?
Or you try to. Not me.
Well, you're supposed to have a look first, Carl.
Depends on.
Right. Sorry, where are you starting?
Let's start with a recap just of yesterday's Premier League. So the Newcastle manager, Eddie Howe, says a point was the least his side deserved from yesterday's meeting with Manchester City. It finished 3-3 at St James's Park. Newcastle led by 3-1 early in the second half there. Elsewhere, Chelsea suffered a 3-0 defeat at Leeds. Brighton were 2-0 winners over West Ham. Manchester United, meanwhile, will look to register their first points of the Premier League season tonight. They take on Liverpool at Old Trafford, where kick-off is at 8. Here at home yesterday, Shamrock Rovers moved 7 points clear at the top of the SSE Electricity League Premier Division. They beat second place Dundalk by 3-0 in Tala. In athletics, Mark English is now a 2-time European bronze medalist after his last podium finish in 2014. The Donegal native came home in third in last night's men's 800 metres final in Munich. Sarah Lavin finished fifth in the women's 100 metres hurdles final after clocking a new personal best in the semi-final, and Ephraim Gide was sixth in the final of the men's 10,000 metres with Hiko Tonoso in 18th. Shane Lowry agonisingly missed out on a place in this week's Tour Championship last night. He finished in a tie for 12th on 8 under par at the BMW Championship, but it meant he was 31st in the FedEx Cup standings after last night's event. Only the top 30 get into the season finale. Rory McIlroy is 7th in the overall standings. He finished on 9 under par at the BMW Championship and in a tie for 8th. And Patrick Cantley won by a shot there on 14 under. Good news for Pádraig Harrington. He's celebrating another Champions Tour title. He carded a final round of 5 under par 67 to land the Dixon Sporting Goods Open.
Every week.
I actually had no idea about that. Like it's just the Champions Tour sort of exists in a place where it just exists a little below the news cycle, but Harrington's just
every week.
I'm not sure he's not quite at the stage where he's making more money from that than he did in his career, because he did play in that high earning time. Like, I mean, a decade ago, guys were making more money in the Champions Tour than they ever did.
Yeah.
In their life, whereas the post Tiger era money was pretty good, right?
Yeah.
I don't think Harrington's collecting checks that he didn't.
I'd say they're still pretty meaty checks.
I'd say they're substantial.
Yeah, they're meaty, but I think for Harrington it's more about the competitive element. He just loves competing, and obviously you've got the major championships on the Champions Tour as well. That's his second title of the season, I think. But it's, it's 3 rounds. It helps. But I was watching a little bit of the highlights from it this morning. You got like Miguel Angel Jimenez, Stephen Ames, I think, was there as well. It was quite a good standard.
Yeah.
Quite a good standard.
315 grand Harrington won. For,
it's not to be sniffed at.
No.
For his week's work. Is this his 3rd title this year, including the major? Or did he win a
US Open? Yeah. So he's had a really good season. But it's for a guy like Harrington, I think it's just to get the competitive juices flowing week on week. It's a big thing, because realistically, a lot of those guys can't compete in terms of driving distances and stuff with the guys on the regular tour.
Darren Clark is back too.
Yeah, like, because Clark was the senior British Open, right?
Yeah.
He won that. And I don't know, would people have thought him less likely to succeed? You can see with Harrington's mentality why he would keep going. But like, sometimes I watched the Harrington one, and there was this very unheralded American pro in it who had been a very average career, but then all of a sudden they just peak, like the later developer who at 50 suddenly this is their moment, like this is the peak of their career, and yet the other guys were just sort of like, this is an exhibition.
Harrington has already won this year in 11 events $2 million, and he's second on the money list, on the Charles Schwab Cup money list, which obviously is not quite the same as the that's not bad. Darren Clark, by the way, has won 800 grand this year, which I'd say is more money than he's won since the year after he won the Open, because he basically wasn't making cuts anymore.
No, it's true. You make a lot of money being Ryder Cup captain, don't you? But that's basically the one. You pick up money on the
prize money.
Circuit. The prize money. No, of course, different.
Yeah, but I think you're right there, and for guys that are like 45, 46, it does give them something to aim for when they do get to that 50 mark. To try and stay that little bit more competitive. But fair play to Pádraig Harrington. He was 3 shots clear of Thongchai Jaidi in second last night. In the cycling, just to mention, Sam Bennett, of course, holds the green jersey in the Vuelta a España after 3 stages of the race. He took his second victory of this year's event with yesterday's sprint finish. That made him only the second Irishman after Sean Kelly to win 10 stages in Grand Tours. The riders are taking a rest day today and return to action tomorrow. It's expected the new Mayo senior football manager will be confirmed tonight. It's understood a meeting of the county board is set to take place, with clubs due to ratify James Horan's successor. Interviews for the position are believed to have taken place over the weekend. Kevin McStay and Ray Dempsey among those in the running for the position, alongside Declan Shaw and Mike Solon.
So I'm looking at Harrington's this is a website I've never used before, so it might be inaccurate, but this is like Harrington's 3rd most successful or 4th most successful year in his career in terms of career earnings.
Well, there you go.
Prize money. Sorry. Now, obviously, when he's winning, he's getting massive bonuses for winning the Open and winning the PGA Tour, but the PGA majors, $1.8 million in 03-04, 2.6 in 04-05, and 2.6 in 06-07, 2.6 in 08-09, and they're only $2 million. So it's been worth his while to dust off the club.
No. Financially, it's absolutely worth it. Werner Langer went in and he's probably one who probably made more money, I'd say, on the Champions Tour than he did.
Langer finished 6th, joined 6th with Darren Clark yesterday to pick up 70 grand.
He's still going, Langer. He's just like, he's still churning it out every week. He's just like, his current account is in thriving.
Tied sixth.
Thriving.
Finished with a 68 for 71 grand. Thanks very much.
Yeah. I mean, it's a nice way. It's a nice way to live.
Carl, I mean,
I tell you, that's. I was just going to say.
You must be thinking about this.
I'm going to aim. I've got a.
You can properly golf, right? Okay.
He's a golfer.
No. Yeah. Not at Champions Tour level.
Well, I mean,
I've got.
How many years have you got to get to 50?
22 years.
You just want to peak at that stage.
22 years, practice 5 days a week.
Be ready to go.
You'll have your 10,000 hours done in no time.
Yeah, yeah. I tell you, for that money, might be bad. One good finish. You just
need to go into the bar the night before, buy a couple of drinks for the lads. They'll totally switch off. They'll be relaxed,
Yeah.
Time to strike.
Right.
Let's see.
Anything else?
And just to I mentioned the Mayo manager's job, and then there's racing in Bannerrobe this evening. 1st of 8 there goes to post at 4:30. But it should be interesting to see who gets the Mayo job.
Yeah. So what time do you think we're going to get it?
Well, they reckon there's a county board meeting tonight at about 7 or 8.
It'll have leaked before that, surely.
I'm not sure. I think they're determined that it doesn't leak.
Okay.
That's the sense that I get.
Twitter is aflame, as you would expect.
Yeah.
So.
It's going to be very interesting, but I think the quality of candidates that they have for that job is fantastic.
And clearly it's going to have a knock-on impact on other counties who are waiting to see who falls out from who's available.
Yeah. There was talk that Stephen Rochford was being linked with possibly Roscommon. I'm not sure what the lie of the land is there. There hasn't been much talk about the Roscommon job. Pat Flanagan, I think, is in the mix there as well. And obviously Donegal, there's been nothing on the Donegal job.
No, that's quiet, and that's the one I think is probably most linked. So we shall see, and we'll obviously be talking about that in more detail on tomorrow's show. It's 8:50. A reminder, OTB AM, brought to you live each morning with Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. So let's cross over now. We've heard from the Manchester United side of things with Samuel Luckhurst. It's time for us to get the Liverpool view ahead of this game tonight. Phil Thompson joins us. Phil, we're live. Good morning to you. How are you getting on?
Good morning. Very good. A little bit late getting in this morning. Flight was delayed from Tenerife, but looking forward to our chat this morning.
Tell me, what's your level of expectation for a big performance from Liverpool tonight, given the stop-start nature to the season that they've had so far?
Yeah, I think our boys are going to be up for it. My worry is Manchester United will turn up tonight, and you know that for how long depends on how the score goes. But I'm quite sure. Listen, it's football. Manchester United, it's still, I don't care what people say, it is the biggest fixture in world football. No matter where the teams are positioned in the league, they'll be up for it. They'll be absolutely flying. That first 15, 20 minutes is going to be incredible. But I feel our lads are up for it as well. To talk about the 2 draws, being 4 points behind City. We see what this Premier League's like with Manchester City's game yesterday. So I am looking forward to it. I'm up for it. I think the players will be as well.
The 2 performances haven't been the same, I don't think. The first game, they weren't very good. The second game, they were good but couldn't score. And that's different, right? Because you can...
Agree. No, without a doubt. It's a fair point. I don't think I spoke to you, didn't I, after the Fulham game? And it wasn't good. There was a lot of complacency in there. But the Crystal Palace game, if people seen that match as I did, it was very, very good. You're quite right. We just could not score. You always run that risk because you have so much of the ball. You play that very high line. A good ball, a through ball can cut you open, and Zaha put it away really well. But the overall performance was very, very good. It's just it was one of those games that we've all seen, guys. But if we turn up and we have that again, Man United they're under a little bit of pressure, not under a lot of pressure. I think they're going to have a go. And that means that they're going to have to come out a little bit. As we've seen with Fulham did have a go, but Palace sat back, defended deep. I think Manchester United are under so much pressure. I don't think the fans would accept them just sitting back and let Liverpool just have the ball for 65, 70% of the game.
So, can Liverpool use that to their advantage, their sort of knowledge of the Manchester United's position coming into it? Like, do you almost use your experience to anticipate that there's going to be a strong 15, 20 minutes? You sort of, Liverpool ease their way into the game and then sort of turn the screw as time goes on?
No, without a doubt. I think that'll be the mentality. Liverpool will try and keep possession to draw Manchester United forward, to make the play sort of be quite open. Manchester United will be nervous. They won't want to get caught. They will know Liverpool they are better in possession. So if they go looking for it, if Ronaldo plays, he will be on fire early on. He will rush. He will try and close down. I don't think he understands the closing down, as great a player that he is. And Liverpool can get through that first line of defence. But that first 15 or 20 minutes will be absolutely hectic. Yes, we know about a demonstration. That will motivate them to the fans to an extent. So I just think Liverpool are going to have to ride it out. I think once that passes by, I think and hope that there's only going to be one winner.
Phil, does the City result actually allow Liverpool to be a bit more relaxed tonight? And in a curious way, it ratchets down the pressure, and so should actually give them the opportunity to perform more relaxed, more in themselves, a bit more confidence, and like, you know, do you know what I mean? In a weird way, it shouldn't have any impact, but it does.
Exactly, and listen, these guys now have played together for quite a while. They know what big games consist of, how it goes. But yeah, they'll probably be sitting there and looked at it and said, oh, well, there you go. Everybody was having a go at Liverpool because they drew it at Fulham, because they drew against Palace. Well, there you go. City have gone to Newcastle, and what a game it was. And the game sort of, you know, it ended in a draw. They were 3-1 down, and full credit to them, but probably at 3-3 they've come in and they've probably felt like it was a win, Man City. But it's still the points total. So, yes, Liverpool will a little bit ago. Well, there you go. The league can be quite open. It's not as over and done with as what people may think.
And what does that do? Does it just allow you to maybe risk a pass that you wouldn't have done? Or does it have any impact?
No, not on that side of it. I think it's psychologically the players will be up for this. As I said, this is a huge game, no matter where it's. You've seen how Liverpool approached it last year for the 90 minutes, and then at Anfield, they were up for it. After winning 5-0 at Old Trafford, they were still up for it. And listen, I played in games where we were the top dog, and Manchester United came and it was huge. And then I've seen for many years when Manchester United had their great sides, they were looking at Liverpool and they were 7th or 8th place in the league, and they didn't seem to have that motivation as much. But they were such a good side that they turned us over time, particularly in the Roy Evans era. So it was like that. But I think now both teams, huge respect for each other. And I just think with all that, the hype that's gone round this game, I think Liverpool will be up for it as much as Man United.
So what team you looking to see on the pitch tonight then, Phil? I mean, Núñez is suspended. Firmino seems to be available. That seems to be the chat. I mean, is it a straightforward swap, or are you expecting to see something different?
Do you know something, guys? I just feel Firmino's made for this game against Manchester United. He draws people in, whether it's Maguire. You know, Maguire might not play, is a ploy to get into his head. Whoever it is who's playing at centre-back, to draw him in to those areas. Bobby Firmino's touch is always good. He'll be motivated. So I think this is a good fit for the game. You know, what happened with Núñez was wrong, but I think it just fits into Liverpool's pattern of play a little bit better for this match. So him dropping in there, getting that movement off him with Diaz, Mo Salah, I think it's going to help us.
Who do you want to see in midfield?
Do you know what? It's a big question. I thought Harvey Elliott was absolutely fantastic against Crystal Palace. He might have played his way into this game early on. I do want to see Henderson back. That is an absolute must. So it'll be Harvey Elliott. Be lovely to see the young man how he takes this game. But at the moment, with no Thiago, I think Harvey Elliott with his touch, I think he could probably start with Hendo and with Fabinho.
And that team, like on paper, is a far superior team to whatever Manchester United put out. And so you have to, like we were talking about this earlier, Dan was making, the evidence of the teams. That's what should make your mind up when you're thinking about what's going to happen, notwithstanding all the outside noise around Ten Hag and his team selection. Liverpool should be favourites, and they should be looking to go and punch their rivals in the mouth tonight, right?
No, absolutely. Listen, if the both teams, Manchester United, as you're saying with that pressure, Liverpool are the better team, without a doubt. If we play our proper game, if Manchester United come out and have a go and they try, because that has been one of the main problems. They don't know whether to stick or twist, to try the high press, which they've not been very good at and don't understand it, for 90 minutes. And if they try and come and have a go and go toe-to-toe, they know they could get hit. But then they know the fans will be demanding. Then if they're doing that and reluctantly people are stepping out, Liverpool will cut them to bits. That's what I'm saying here. The early pressure from Manchester United after 15, 20 minutes. If Liverpool ride that, don't concede a goal, because the goal will only motivate Manchester United then till half-time. I just see Liverpool running out. We will play our normal game. We won't change. And we can keep possession for fun. And it'll be interesting to see how Manchester United react.
I know you're making the point about the potential for whatever happens pre-match outside and that feeding into the team's desire to go out and be aggressive and try and do something. But we were talking earlier on about the game that Solskjaer picked 3 at the back and defended, and they got a draw in 2019. There's if you're the Man United manager and you're desperate for something here, maybe you pick 3 centre backs and you go ultra defensive.
It's at Old Trafford, and that is the problem. Ollie can try and do that, and he was in a difficult position. And you think, what way do I go here? And if I sit back, it doesn't add up. At this moment, Manchester United, I think, are in that difficult position. What does Ten Hag do? Does he say, right, we're going to go for it? I don't think they have the players to do the high press. And I just think they're in such a difficult mode that will impact the way they play. They know what the fans are like. They know there'll be the problem with the demonstration and what guys that comes, and that they were hoping that if Rashford plays, Rashford absolutely turns up. If it goes his way, he'll give 90 minutes. He'll be dashing everywhere. If it's the Marcus Rashford that we've seen for the last sort of 9 months, if it goes wrong after 15 minutes, a lot of the players can disappear.
Did Liverpool, if you're a Liverpool defender, do you want to see Ronaldo's name on the team sheet tonight? In the context of what you mentioned there, he maybe not be best suited to the sort of the pressing that they might need to do. So I don't know. It's a strange one to be thinking it that way, but
it is a strange one, because you're looking at this guy. I think he has to play for all those problems what I've mentioned there. He, more than anybody, if you do have one chance, you're likely to put it away. Sancho, Rashford maybe need a few chances to actually score, not with Ronaldo. And I think he might pick in with that, just that little bit of a thought. We might not get many chances. He is the one who's more likely to take it. So it is a difficult one. And I think he's got a few sort of team selections to hopefully get right. The
Maguire situation, right? They obviously view Maguire as a long-term asset. They decided to give him the captaincy during the summer, which maybe, I think even at the time people were wondering, is that necessarily the right thing? And now there's talk in the local press and the Manchester Evening News that he's going to be dropped for the game tonight. We'll see when the team gets named if his name is in the team sheet. What do you make of that handling of that situation at the moment, and what do you think is his future?
I think it's very, very, very difficult. I think at the moment it's hard for him to get out of this rut, isn't it? Harry Maguire likes to defend deep. Harry's not the greatest of pace, and he likes to sort of get the players around him, play what they call a low block. He's more than happy to sit on the edge of his box and play that way. That is not the nature of this modern game as we're seeing it. It's all about pushing up, pressing as a unit, the defence pushing close to the midfield to the forwards. Harry doesn't like to get caught out. And I think he knows that, which is creating a problem with his mind. He is a good footballer. He is a fine player, but he is in that predicament. I would think at this moment as good a player he is. If there was a big offer on the table for him, I think Man United, Ten Hag would take it because that would sort his problem out. And I would think that Harry Maguire would think, I need a new start. Maybe a new way of playing will suit my game, because he struggled for quite a bit. Always played well for England, I have to say, because I think he is a fine player. But in this modern day, with his lack of pace, he too often gets caught out. And his confidence is absolutely at a low ebb. All the talk won't do him any favours. Having said that, Ten Hag might have called him in and going, a couple of days ago, listen, son, don't tell anybody, but you're playing. All the flack that you're getting, you have my trust. And that might help him tonight.
All right, Phil, give us your prediction for tonight. What do you think is actually going to happen?
I see the way we've started defensively, I see us conceding, but I think we will run out 3-1 winners.
Enjoy the game, Phil. Great stuff. Thanks a million. Cheers.
Lovely to that out.
You too. So Owen Sheehan's at that game tonight for us, and we'll be reporting in the aftermath about the pre-match, and then obviously whoever we can talk to afterwards as well. It's an interesting game.
Yeah, I mean, and sort of Phil makes the point there is always that thought, that you're galvanised in some way by the players, that is, Manchester United players are in some ways galvanised by the atmosphere and the sense of occasion, and it's Liverpool, and that's true. It can happen. I've seen it over the years, say big Ireland games at the Aviva or something, where the team's under the pressure, the manager's under pressure, and you generally find that they will start a game well, but it doesn't sustain for 90 minutes because it papers over cracks for a period of time. It's very hard to paper over those cracks against a pretty relentless opponent for 90 minutes.
And this group, we have seen fail every test that they've had over the last 4 or 5 years.
Unless they somehow score early. And I mean, I know there also have been games where they've scored and haven't won as well. But, if you suddenly have something to hold on to, and it sort of plays, it sort of somehow manages to switch the pressure towards Liverpool, or this team is terrible, we should be beating them. Let's force things that we shouldn't be forcing here. But you sort of know from the quality of these top sides, the top two sides, they generally don't do that. Like against Fulham the opening day, they actually looked a bit gassed. They just looked flat and stuff, and they seem to get a little bit of that spark back against Crystal Palace. So you're sort of assuming.
I think Palace are quite good.
Yeah, no, they are
That's
decent as well. Yeah, no, and they also had. We probably didn't get into it big time with Phil. He mentioned it at the end defensively. I mean, you could see the Palace goal, and that Liverpool, the way they play, are sometimes susceptible to a team that can break really well against them. But you're talking about Manchester United. This is my point about you assume Ronaldo plays, but would you like an on-song Rashford or someone breaking against that type of team? Of course, on-song is the key sort of phrase there.
Absolutely. One of the things that we didn't talk about yet so far at the weekend was West Ham yesterday being beaten at home by Brighton. Brighton have started the season really well. They look like they have a recruitment policy, an ability to generate funds, a good progressive young manager. They have an identity. Is it possible that West Ham last year was one of those, like we talked about earlier, the Irish teams doing well, and those it was just a surge of something that happened, because they're bottom of the table. They're actually, the results were so bad yesterday that
I mean, I know they played Man City. I suppose that's an unfortunate one in terms of momentum for a season and stuff. And Brighton are good, but it's like a form of second season syndrome. In the sense that you have that good season where you overperform, or you sort of surprise people. And to be fair, I mean, they've had a couple of decent seasons back to back. Maybe it catches up to you. I'm just you mentioned West Ham. I'm just thinking that I can't unsee. Did you see that video of Declan Rice singing "Ice Ice Baby" over the weekend?
No.
On A League of Their Own.
Stealing chemical bands
with Mika Richards and Jamie Redknapp as his backing dancers.
Was it good?
I would have to say no.
Is it worth watching though?
It is worth watching. Where is this going, Declan? Where are you going here? I mean, I sort of sometimes feel that Declan Rice is going to be presenting light entertainment shows in around 20 years' time,
or maybe before that,
or maybe before then. I know, he is meant to be a great pro who's not a not a drinker or anything like that, if you know what I mean, that maybe he actually lives quite a dedicated life, and he's showing this other side of his personality now, going on the panel shows with his mates. But I don't know why that sprung to mind, but I mean, maybe it's important that should be mentioned. He should have been in the red, really.
He needs a good season this year to justify whatever transfer is coming his way, and to make sure that he is the one that, because we were actually talking about this, I think, on Colin Bowie was talking about all the potential landing spots for him. They all kind of have a solution in the spots that he plays in. Calvin Phillips has just signed for Manchester City. Casemiro has now joined Manchester United.
But you did mention what Kante's
Chelsea.
31.
Chelsea was the one.
I feel like he's going to end up at Chelsea. I think that that story would probably appeal to him. Like, he was released by them as a kid. JT's a big influence in his life.
Maybe John Terry comes back as the manager and signs him.
I feel like Rice will end up there. That's where he'll go. And he is a great player, for notwithstanding the pretty terrible Ice baby. People maybe shouldn't watch.
Speaking of English midfielders who are having a difficult time at the moment, Steven Gerrard.
Oh yeah,
is he just unlucky with the result at the weekend, or is he like completely out of his depth?
He's just unlucky or not good. I don't think he's out of his depth. He did a good job at Rangers. Like, he did, and I know people would say, well, it was the Michael Beale angle, and that's certainly problematic for him in terms of has he lost his power? Has he lost his Samson style here? Has he been stripped of it? But you'd be probably more you'd be following this closer. You'd be following this closer than me in terms of the sort of the mood music around it. I know he wasn't doing an especially good job last year, but I don't think he was doing a particularly bad one.
It felt like it was getting to know everybody. This is a period of settling in, and we'll see at the start of next season. He'll have had his full pre-season. He'll have had the communication in terms of what the recruitment is supposed to be, and it looks unplanned. It looks like now it's very unlucky in that their key defensive signing has popped his Achilles and is gone for basically the season in Carlos, and that's very unfortunate because it looked like they needed somebody of that level of experience to just be in charge, and that's gone.
Yeah,
but I don't know, they can't get over Luca Dean on 180 grand a week. Can't get over that.
Well, see, I think the mid-table of the Premier League is mad. Like, it's hard. Like, you have to be a really good manager to somehow retain a degree of like freshness about what you're doing and direction, because unless you have a massive injection of cash, like, you end up like managers get churned out after 2-3 years, because after a while your deficiencies become apparent more regularly, and people say, well, what do? We just have to change this manager. Now, he's very early in the day, but the problem you have is someone like you've mentioned there, Brighton, and you have someone like Potter, who's clearly doing an excellent job and has a purpose, and his team has a bit of an identity, and like that's problematic if you're Steven Gerrard or Frank Lampard or whoever it might be that probably is dealing with more money on paper, in terms of what you're spending.
Yeah.
And that is the problem. As much as I do sometimes have a little bit of a sympathy for the managers, because there's not a huge amount. Like, you have to do exceptional things, like Rodgers did with Leicester for a while, Moyes did with West Ham for a while, and maybe it's just
that's
not sustainable.
Yeah.
And then it flattens out. But obviously it's flattening out pretty early for him, which might be a slight issue.
One quick point on Leicester there, because you brought it up. I have a lot of sympathy for Brendan Rodgers. A lot of people don't have any sympathy for Brendan Rodgers because he's got such a great welcome for himself, and that's fair enough. I understand his character rubs people up the wrong way, but the job he did was absolutely spectacular.
100%.
Winning a trophy, getting them to within 45 minutes of Champions League qualification, and now it appears as if the owners have decided to back away from investing the way they had previously. What would have happened in previous years is they would have bought Fofana's replacement, and then they would have sold Fofana. When it was being well run, they bought the replacement, they sold the guy at massive profit, the replacement stepped in, like, Fofana and Harry Maguire, everybody knew what the carousel was going to be. This time they're not willing to. I don't understand why they don't just take the 60 or 70 million, whatever it is. They're haggling over 4.5-5 million difference.
Yeah, it does seem like, you've mentioned it there, it does seem like the owners, maybe it's just become a bit more detached, and like that is, I mean, you are in the Premier League now, you are very much reliant on the whims of your owners, and that time they won the FA Cup, but they missed out on the Champions League narrowly. That possibly is their sliding doors moment.
100%. Right, OTB AM brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Here's what's on OTB Sports Radio for you today. OTB Gold is Colm Gooch Cooper at 1 o'clock. Splonk is on at 3. Our Culture Hall of Fame is the US office at 4. OTB Gold, Joe meets Sherlock Nan, and the show is live tonight from 7 with Joe Malloy in the hot seat. You can follow OTB across our social channels, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and make sure you download our app for the latest and best sports content and analysis. Ronan Mullen is going to join us next to look back at a title fight that never quite reached the level that it might have done. That's next.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
Have you subscribed to the OTB Football Podcast?
When Gary Neville responded instantly, he said, but I've got so much more to say on this subject. I found lots of people like that. It's a rivalry of such intensity and emotion.
I'm looking to tomorrow to come in and be the best that I can be in training and to train as hard as I possibly can.
Subscribe now to the OTB Football Podcast stream wherever you get your podcasts and download the OTB Sports app.
If your business relies on a van, that wouldn't sound good. But this does. Get up to 75% off van insurance. Now available in FBD branches nationwide. FBD Insurance. Support. It's what we do. 75% no claims discount based on 5 years claims free. Available on new van policies used for farm or business purposes. Terms and conditions apply. Underwritten by FBD Insurance plc. FBD Insurance Group Limited, trading as FBD Insurance, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
OTB AM
with Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs Razor with exfoliating bar.
15 minutes past 9 this morning here on OTB AM. We're looking back at the heavyweight fight between Alexander Usyk and Anthony Joshua. Ronan Mullen is here with us. Ronan, I went to bed straight as soon as the fight was over because I was absolutely shattered. Didn't even stay up for because I just assumed it was a unanimous points decision with like a clear-cut 4 to 6 round victory for Usyk.
Like you reach that point in life where you don't stay up for the events anymore, right? That's the thing.
Well, I stayed up for the whole fight.
Well, I mean, you did well then. It was an earlier start. It wasn't your 3 a.m. job.
It's true. Yeah. It was the bit where it's like, well, I know the result here, so I'm just going now. But actually,
so you didn't even wait to hear the scores read out?
No, because I didn't need to. But
one of the judges was there going, well, he's sitting there going,
teaching me a lesson.
What a fight from Joshua that was.
So explain how that happened.
Explain how it was split
decision.
Well, Glenn Feldman was accosted after the fight by Rob Tebbett, a roving journalist, who said, what was the story there? And Feldman essentially deferred to his supervisor, saying he couldn't really answer that question.
So Feldman's the judge who scored it in favour of Joshua.
And, you know, the usual line of it's subjective, etc. And to be fair, Joshua boxed much better this time than he did in the last fight, I think. 7-5 Usyk, I can definitely see. I think that was around the score I had. And it's just, you can't make a case that Joshua won 7 rounds. I think Steve Bunce is the only other person I've seen make that case, and he was ringside, so much better vantage point than me or most of us. But a lone voice in the crowd there is Steve Bunce, because I think most people thought quite close in the 9th round. I think if you look at the judges' scorecards, they all had it within 1 round either way.
Right.
And Joshua had such an impressive 9th round that Eddie Hearn was scuttling over to Joshua's corner in between rounds saying, he's gone, you've got him. And then Usyk produces one of the all-time great heavyweight rounds in round 10, puts on a masterclass and just streaks home after that, takes the 11th and the 12th as well, in my opinion, I think in the opinion of most. So any doubt that might have been simmering around going into those championship rounds was eliminated, because Usyk put on a virtuoso display at the end there.
Yeah. When it was right there for Anthony Joshua to reclaim this and to catapult himself into the all-time greats, he couldn't do it.
No, and it's tricky. We did the pre-fight breakdown with Eric Donovan and Declan Taylor, and all of us picked Usyk by stoppage because we thought Joshua would throw caution to the wind and just get caught with a check hook or something on the way in. And as it turned out, he had a very sophisticated game plan, Joshua, but he wasn't winning enough rounds to justify the game plan. It was like fighting not to lose almost in some ways, which is doing him something of a disservice, because if in that 9th round he had bided his time to that point, and if he had picked a perfect shot and put Usyk away, you would have thought perfect tactics by Joshua. He didn't gas out, he paced himself. But as it turned out, he kind of ran out of time, and we went out of that 9th round thinking the tide had turned irrevocably in Joshua's favour. And as it turned out, Usyk was the one who came out in round 10, and Joshua had basically given his best shot in that round 9.
Yeah, the start of round 10 was the bit where he could have pressed home some kind of advantage, but actually he just allowed Usyk to regain his life, and as a result of that, Usyk took massive confidence in the fact that the storm was over.
Exactly. I think Joshua, in some sort of cruel irony, his most impactful round was round 9, but as it turned out, it emptied the tank on his behalf and meant that Usyk was able to take over. But Usyk had the resolve and the technical sophistication to pick the correct punches in that round 10 and take over. Like, as much as he displayed skill throughout the fight, he displayed enormous will as well to bounce back. And
Usyk
to reclaim or hold on to those belts that Joshua would throw on the floor a few minutes later. But, you know, I think when the chips were down, quite literally, Usyk was the one that came out on top.
A couple of just bits and pieces in the actual fight itself to talk about then. At the end, when it looked like he was completely gassed, Joshua was leaning on Usyk and kind of wrestling him around the ring. When you're like 2.5, 3 stone heavier and you know your opponent is essentially fitter than you are or more mobile than you are, why don't you do that from the start? Like, if Tyson Fury was in that round fighting Usyk, it's not just going to be hiding behind the jab. He's going to lean on him and he's going to weigh him down and he's going to tire him out. Is that just the ring craft that Joshua doesn't have because he can't do it? What's behind his being nice to his opponent?
Yeah, like the ringcraft point is a pertinent one because it was where he fell down in the first fight. He bought all the talk about Usyk being this transcendent boxer, this master craftsman, and Joshua wanted to go out in Tottenham and prove, you know, I won an Olympic gold medal as well, I can outbox him. And ultimately you have like a classically trained musician against the New York Philharmonic, because Usyk has a global skill set. He's better than Joshua in every aspect. Like, from a technical standpoint, the one thing Joshua does have in his favour is that size, and I thought bringing in Robert Garcia, he was going to go back to that elemental basis a little bit. Like, he'd parted ways with Rob McCracken, who was his Olympic coach and his Team GB coach, and gone with Garcia, who's an out-and-out pro guy. And Garcia was telling him after 4 rounds, it's 4-0, you've won every round. And you could definitely make a case Joshua won a couple of those rounds, but there was no way he had the ascendancy in the way his corner was telling him. So the one thing Joshua needs to take away from this, and I think he can take away a lot, I think his stock went up. I think he boxed quite well against possibly the best fighter in the world, but he needs to go back to the fundamentals a little bit, the things that made him an exciting fighter when he was coming through. And it's going to be a bit of matchmaking now because he's not at the dance now. It's Usyk and Fury who are going on to determine who the best heavyweight in the world is, and Joshua needs to find his way to be the heavyweight champion of the rest of the world and take on the likes of Dillian White again, or Joseph Parker, or fight Deontay Wilder. Like, who wouldn't want to see that? Like, Wilder's fighting Robert Helenius later this year, and if Wilder gets a comeback fight, and you saw the fireworks he and Fury had, throw Wilder and Joshua in there and have an absolute firefight.
Yeah, what does the boxing purist, such as yourself, what do they think of Anthony Joshua? Because I think there's some Kenny Egan coming up, and he would have been speaking about maybe some of the fights that were picked from on the way up, and he was maybe, I don't know, like a great story. Like there was a great story, so there was always a suggestion that the story was crafted in such a way to sort of further his progression, accelerate his progression. Like, you tell me, like, has he spoken of?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I put this, so Declan Taylor's on the beat over there, and I'm kind of fascinated by the perception of Joshua, because that there is, as with most things in life, it's polar opposites. You either fall down on Joshua's a hype job, never had it, or he's, you know, underrated, you know, he's actually a really good boxer, and there's no room for the grey area. Like, I think he has been manoeuvred quite well, but, you know, he has had signature wins as well. You look at his CV, he's beaten some top contenders, and I know that the timeliness of the Klitschko fight at Wembley fell quite favourably for him, and he had to come through hell to ultimately win that fight, but that was the breakout moment for him as a crossover star. So he has had big moments as well, but you go right back to 10 years ago and his first fight at London 2012, and a lot of people in the attendance would tell you he was quite fortunate to get the nod in that opening round, and then lo and behold he goes on and wins a gold medal in his hometown, and the sky's the limit thereafter. Eddie Hearn sees dollar signs, and that's what they cashed in on ultimately. So he's at a really interesting juncture now. I think he's lost 3 of his last 6. So
I do think that legacy is interesting, right? Because I saw somebody talking about, he saved boxing on Twitter, and then getting absolutely hammered by everybody. It's like, wow, boxing existed. It's like the Premier League kind of thing, right? But actually, there's a genesis of truth in the fact about the heavyweight division in particular. We'd stopped watching, the common sports fan had stopped watching heavyweight boxing when the Klitschkos ruled the division and were fighting in small halls in the middle of Europe against no marks who never had a chance of beating them. And then, actually, I know you're saying it's the end of the Klitschko career, but somebody had to come and take it. And actually...
Well, Fury did it first, but I think Joshua put the exclamation point on it. Fury went over to Germany and basically neutered the Klitschko ascendancy, whereas Joshua put the final point on it with the knockout and the nature of it. But
was it also during the period where Fury was effectively in retirement, and so it looked like there was nothing there, and at least brought a massive surge of public interest to it again, where we are supposed to be interested in this because it is incredible theatre, and it's like absolutely brutal as a sport. So it's great to watch. Yeah, I think his role in helping to repopularise the heavyweight division is something that stands in his favour.
Yeah, but what's going on with him afterwards then? Because this is the thing,
he became a celebrity and got loads of money.
Yeah, but I'm saying that after the
fight the other night.
After the fight the other night, because it's sort of, you're talking about legacy and sort of all this the power of the personality. And yet it seems there's this other sort of side to this fight, which is, he's doing the old social media apology the day after, which is never a good thing.
Yeah, I don't know if it was his own crafted line, but he said something like, I was battling my emotions, I was battling Usyk, and I lost both. So
good line. It was a very good line.
When you put it in that kind of context, or put yourself in that mind frame, you can kind of see after 12 rounds of concussive punishment and apparently crazy temperatures in that arena, the dehydration levels, I think, from both fighters. They both mentioned it after the fight. So that conflicts, or that combination of factors, I think you can kind of see why someone wouldn't be thinking overly clearly, but that was kind of the extreme of that, where he was quite incoherent. And I think if you could take that back, needless to say, he would. The thing with the belts, almost, I think he was told on his way back to the locker room, that wasn't great, maybe you should go back and apologise. Kind of escalated from there. So yeah, I think unfortunately for him, he's going to become a meme for the foreseeable future, and I think it's probably in his best interest to get back in the ring and maybe move the story on if he can.
The sweating in the ring was so bad that they had to stop the fight a couple of times to dry down the ring itself. And was it Joshua was getting wiped down, or was Usyk was getting wiped down there?
Yeah, it had been problematic earlier in the night as well, so
maybe we shouldn't be having fights in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, there's a plethora of reasons why we shouldn't be, but that's
sporting hotbed. Very hot.
It turns out it's too hot.
Yeah, just sometimes it can be too much.
And it can have an impact on stuff like this.
But I wonder, Fury Usyk, as I mentioned, is the go-to fight now, but I think it probably would sell out stadium in the UK. Does it have the raw box office attraction to go to Las Vegas or New York? I'm not sure. So there's a very good chance it's going to end up back.
Much better for our bedtime if it doesn't go there, I have to say.
Yeah,
that's really going to test you. That's going to test you when it goes to 4 a.m.
No, it's too late.
Just record it.
So I think there's a very good chance it'll end up back in Saudi.
And is Fury going to take that fight? Presumably he will, because he's already kind of talking about Usyk being a bum, which is that's code for Tyson. I'm back, baby.
Yeah,
a week later,
fresh from retirement number 89, he's back.
And so you think it's inevitable that fight will happen next?
Well, Fury can't be seen to, on one hand, be saying, I'm the best heavyweight of this era, I'm the best heavyweight of all time, and then dodge the best contender. Like, Usyk has a very... like, you look at Joshua, or you look at Fury's resume, he obviously beat Klitschko, and that's incomparable, I think, given where Klitschko was at that time. But then his best win, aside from that, is Wilder. And Usyk's just beaten Joshua twice, so... he's beaten the other guy in that little trio. So I think Fury has to beat Usyk to basically copper fasten any notion that he's the de facto number one. I think as things stand, you'd have to give him that crown if he actually does firm up that unretirement. But it's a fascinating fight. Like, I have to give it some thought, because you've got two absolute otherworldly technicians here, and Fury's got the size, and boxing's rife with adages, but one of them is a good big one beats a good little one, and they're two very good ones. But Fury has that size, and it could be difficult to look past that ultimately, because he knows how to use that size in a way Joshua doesn't.
Yeah, that's the bit that you think would put it in his favour. Now, in retrospect, given what we've just seen, surely Tyson Fury is thinking, why didn't I take the 100 million payday and fight Joshua and have a trilogy with him, because I would have beaten him 3 times.
Yeah, I think that fight will come to pass eventually. Joshua could lose his next couple and still the Fury fight would make money, because for all that Joshua could be dismissed in certain quarters, skill set wise, he has got power, and in the heavyweight division that is an equaliser, and Fury might just lapse at some point in the fight and give Joshua an opening, and you just never know.
It seems to me that there's something introverted about his character in the ring that you can't have if you're going to be an all-time great heavyweight. That actually, when the moment comes, you need to rise to it, as opposed to it's always in the football pod about Jim Gavin saying you don't rise to the occasion, you fall back in the level of your training, and that's clearly happening to Joshua. But actually, to be the great heavyweight, you need to be able to get up off the canvas the way Tyson Fury did, or you need to be able to do what he did that first time against Klitschko, where it's like you're something bigger in the moment. Like, he's had a great career, he's incredibly rich, it's an incredible story, but if he used to be an all-time great, that 9th round he needed to finish it, or the 10th round he needed to come out and follow it up. But his character was to step back and go, ooh, the moment is here for me and I'm not big enough for it.
Like, it's irrefutable. You look at parallels in the past, and I mentioned Klitschko had his adversity early in his career, a little bit more gung-ho in the first third of his career when he teamed up with Emmanuel Stewart. It was more safety first, belt and braces, but he wasn't afraid to put opponents away either. And then Lennox Lewis had those bolts from the blue defeats, and did get a bit more measured in his approach. But again, like, if he saw an opening to end a fight, he ended it. And I think you can't dismiss the fact that Joshua is not the same fighter as he was before he got knocked out by Andy Ruiz, because that was such a humbling defeat on all levels. Like, how could this Adonis lose to someone like Andy Ruiz? Quite apart from the fact that Andy Ruiz is actually a really good fighter, but it just the optics were bad. Any notion that Joshua was this perfect specimen in the non-boxing circles was gone after that, because he lost to this guy who looks like a schmuck. And then when he beat Ruiz in the rematch, it was quite uninspiring. There were many flashpoints, and then every fight thereafter there's been an absence of jeopardy and a certainty of outcome, I think, in how he went about things. So I think, as I said at the start, I think he needs to go back to the elemental levels a little bit. I think a Dillian White fight would give him the eye of the tiger back, because if you go back and watch their first fight, it wasn't so much a boxing match as just a fight. So I think that could be the one that recaptures it for him if he goes that direction. Okay, so that's his future. How quickly does the Usyk Fury fight get made? Can it happen October, November, December, or is it a 2023 thing? I think it should happen towards the end of the year. It's got as much momentum now as it's going to have. What this sport doesn't need and what this fight doesn't need is this to linger for another 12 months and the two lads to take interim fights in between, and one of them loses or gets injured and it just dwindles away. Because how many chances now have we had where two fighters have had all the belts and could have matched up? Like, you had it with Joshua and Wilder, you had it with Fury and Joshua, now you have it with Usyk and Fury. And at some stage, these two lads just need to get it on. So ultimately, I think that will happen. I think there's enough will there and enough money there, more importantly. So hopefully towards the end of the year, but I think I'm more optimistic. I think this fight will happen actually in the next 6 months anyway. All right, Ronan, good stuff. Thanks very much for joining us. Cheers, lads. Dan, thanks for coming in as well today. Owen's going to be back tomorrow, or actually probably won't be in studio, but certainly will be with us tomorrow in the aftermath of the game at Old Trafford tonight. A reminder, we're live each morning with Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. OTB AM back tomorrow. More reaction from the game. We'll be joined by Daniel Harris. Niamh Briggs is going to join us from Japan after a sensational win for the Irish women's team at the weekend. Gareth Roberts will also join us for the Liverpool perspective. Right now, some more analysis from Kenneth Egan and his reaction to Saturday night's fight between Usyk and Joshua with Joe. Enjoy. See you tomorrow.
Eamon Sweeney, back page of the Sunday Independent. Irish are no longer also-rans. So this piece does what it says in the tin, really, and finishes by saying this was the week Irish athletics started to shout stop. Now it's onwards and upwards. And he begins, Cliona, and you would have followed Ciara McGeehan's career very closely. Most of us think he begins by talking about how brilliant her run was, and it was the run of her life. And she's, charts her emergence as the finest young talents in Sonia O'Sullivan with a World Youth Silver Medal in 2009, has had a brilliant career with some disappointments thrown in. And on Friday night in the 1500 metres, where she finished second to Laura Muir, that was an exceptional run from McGeehan.
Yeah, I don't often disagree with Eamon, but I just think some of the coverage of the athletics this week there's been a bit of hyperbole into it, and a little bit carried away, I think, in some respects, and there's just like there is a line at this, like we saw Sarah Healy, who was, again, the next big thing, brilliant young runner who came out this week and was really honest about where she struggles. She won everything at underage level and was just brilliant. And now she's struggling just in the foothills of senior career. And she was saying she finds it hard to mentally not switch off in races. And I'm really interested in that aspect of things, because I think she demonstrates exactly what Ciara demonstrated. Ciara McGeehan, in I think it was 2010, took a silver medal at World Junior. Now that to me is the barometer of where you're going to go in your senior career. And while she's had success, she's had unbelievable struggles, right? And in the end of this piece, Eamon says a lesson of the past week performances by Shanahan, the young 800 metre runner, and Sarah Healy, is that talent will out. It actually won't. The chances are so slim. The margins are so tiny. The standard at world level, apart from European, at world level and Olympic level, where everyone's going to expect now that Rashida Adeleke will be successful, they're so extraordinarily high that actually talent won't out. It takes unbelievably exceptional. And people are saying, Rashida, and look, I had Rashida in this studio with her mum when she was 15, sitting in here at 15, gorgeous mother, Ade, just she comes, her family are just phenomenal people, and talking about what could happen and where she might go, and they were totally practical, totally realistic, and saying, look, we don't know, she's getting on great, but she's trying to get through her college, and she might go to America, and we don't know what's going to happen. And I just remember how brilliantly practical and really, but she has incredible grit and determination and focus. But everyone is saying, she's only 19 and she turns 20 on August the 29th. But like, some of the best runners in the world at the moment are 19 and 20. Kelly Hodgson, English girl, 800 metre, beaten in the Olympics by Ating Mu, who's actually 19. She won the world 800 metres at 19. Like, Rashida is not the only extraordinarily talented teenager in the world. It just, there's such an ocean. I don't know how Kieran feels as well, how you feel, but like and it's so small here that when they have some success at this level, everyone thinks, they're going to do it again and again and again. And Ciara McGeehan is such a brilliant example of how brilliant she was as a junior, how much she's gone through, and how now at 30 it's coming right for her again. And so I just think we should never let any of that, we should keep things in perspective all the time. I mean, just like everybody, just so delighted to see these incredible kids coming through again. And actually, one of the pieces, and there's a really interesting piece by Cathal as well in the Indo today on their coaching, because what we're producing is world-class coaches here as well, a lot of them unpaid, and you've had some of them on the show and off the ball during the week as well. So it is a fantastic time. They are being inspired, but Ciara McGeehan actually, I think, is going to be her success at the weekend, and the way she raced and the way she's racing now, that confidence that she's racing and her self-belief, I think that for somebody like Sarah Healy, who we know is so incredibly talented middle distance runner, she's going to inspire them. I think Ciara's inspiring people at her level because they will know what she's been through. You can have those generational talents like Rashida, and fingers crossed. And I think sometimes with sprinters as well, it's less complicated for them sometimes. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
And now she's a whole way to go in 400 metres. I think she runs 400 metres, I think, like Bambi on ice. Like, she still doesn't know how to run 4. So her potential is just amazing. But she's only in her second year in America, but she didn't make the American College's 200 metre final this year. That's what the standard is like.
Yeah.
That's what the standard is like.
Mark Gallagher focuses in on Olatunde and Rashida Adeleke, and he makes the point that for Adeleke, this was her 6th competitive race 400. At 400 metres. Yeah, so really, she's just a beginner almost.
Yeah,
in
she
this
is.
Department.
She is.
Kieran, we'll come to these two new superstars in a moment, but on McGeehan and that run?
Yeah, because I was in a different radio program on Friday, and that was the emphasis on that program. The discussion was on how great a championship has been for Ireland, and I was a bit bewildered because generally, I think there were a lot of top 8 performances and there were a lot of positives, but there had been no medal to Ciara McGeehan. And generally, Ireland do deliver medals at the European Championships, more often than not. It's not unusual to come home with 1 or 2 medals. And the bar is raised significantly. Next year, the main event is the World Championship. The following year, the main event is the Olympics. Like Israel Olatunde was Ireland's fastest man after brilliant Euros, and the new Irish record of 10.17 seconds. But there's not a hope again to a World Championship final or Olympic final with 10.17 seconds over 100 metres. So, you know, people are being a bit unrealistic about where they're hyping these. Like, I think Adeleke in particular is a great talent. But to me, looking across the papers, the story of the championship is Ciara Mageean. And, you know, she's mentioned in Eamon Sweeney's column, but it's not the emphasis, the brunt of it isn't about her. She's not mentioned all in the Mail on Sunday. And the Sunday Times have ignored the athletics completely. And I think maybe it's a sign of where that paper is, you know, letting Dennis Walsh go, making some really strange decisions about their sports coverage. But, you know, Ciara Mageean run was one of the most courageous and bravest and intelligent things I've seen from any Irish sports person in a long time. You know, that she had a plan and she went for it. And, you know, it was interesting to hear her talk afterwards about she's thinking of working with a sprint coach.
Yeah,
and
really
that's how she's not happy, just because Laura Muir has that over the last over the last 200 metres. She has a second over her, and just to try to close the gap, because Laura Muir isn't just a European star, she's a world star. And that's where Ciara Mageean is looking to close that gap. And what Ciara Mageean, like Cliona will say the same, like it's strange with the GA now, like even in Donegal, where I spent a lot of time where I'm from, I would know a couple of the Donegal footballers and I would have met them a few times. And I'd actually know the likes of Ciara Mageean, Thomas Barr, and people like that more, that you get to know these people because they open up to you from a very young age, and they're very open. You saw that in the interviews over the past week. And Athletics Ireland actually deserve credit to get a bit of a kick in. But
I think so as well.
They put 8 athletes up for interview before the championships, including most of the main ones, and also made them available during the week after they competed. Like you saw, like across TV, radio, print, Olatunde and Adeleke did a lot of interviews. It was great to see. But I wrote about this during the week, and Mark Gallagher's touched on it as well. It's also great because there's a revolution in Irish sport, and you look at through most of the newcomers that have made the biggest impact with Stephen Kenny's squad, like Adamida, Gavin Bazunu, Kedosi O'Grady, etc. They're of a Nigerian-Irish background, like Olatunde and Adeleke. Stefan Ockenbar won the All-Ireland for Kerry last month, only for injury. He might well have started the game. His father's Nigerian, his mother's Moldovan. And people will tell you on the ground that is having such a positive effect on Irish sport. Like I talked to Jeremy Lyons' coach of Sophie Becker, who was in the 4x400 relay, and his wife, Sinead Galvin, would be an agent to the likes of Ciara Mageean and Thomas Barr. And Sinead told me that herself and Jeremy set up a new athletics club at Clongriffin. And the sport is so popular at grassroots level, they have a waiting list of 110. They can't cope with them.
Right.
And that's a problem. Like athletics actually needs more clubs because there's huge demand for that. But they need, for clubs need tracks to train on. So you can't suddenly magically produce tracks. But she was saying so many of the athletes who've either come into the club or are on the waiting list are from African backgrounds or East European backgrounds, which is a more recent migration. And that can only help Irish sport.
Yeah, that's Mark Gallagher's lovely piece in Mail on Sunday just on that as well, on the New Ireland. And I always feel uncomfortable using that phrase in some ways. I remember somebody pulled me up on it on Twitter before. I remember when some of the young African Irish started to come through in athletics, Jean Akmos and people like that, and saying, you know, they're not New Irish, they're Irish, you know. And so it's a bit of a loaded term, and I'm always worried about using it, but I'm going to use it in this case.
A lot of them do identify as Nigerian Irish.
They say Nigerian, they say African Irish, which is really interesting. I think it's fascinating. But I expect that, and I expected that to happen, and it's brilliant to see it because it means that the work that's being done at club level is embracing local communities and diversity, and that is what we clearly want in Irish society. But it's going to happen. I think we see it in football, we see it in athletics, we're going to see it, I think, in Irish basketball as well. I think we're definitely going to see, particularly Eastern European countries, we're definitely begin to see Lithuanians, countries where basketball is strong. We're going to see those coming through into Irish teams, which is fantastic, that new generation. But the club thing is vital, and Mark's piece is lovely because he goes to the root of it, and he talks to Cecil Johnson, the guy out in Tala, and like Cecil, you know, and what he says is there's a character like Johnson in every athletics club in the country and every sports club in the country, let's be honest. You know, for the more than 20 years he served whatever role Tala AC has needed: chairman, press officer, secretary, and of course coach. And like, without these people at grassroots level, this would not be happening. And that's why it's so important that coaching and support for coaching is really important. Athletics Ireland got it absolutely hammered in the post-Olympic review. But I think that from what I've seen, what happens is actually their support for young athletes and through the Youth Olympics and everything is actually really good. It's when athletes get into those transitional phases, sometimes they and their coaches struggle because the money isn't there to help them get onto that next level. So this is why I think this is important, and I think it's really important that we're seeing, and he talks about it as well, and a couple of them talk about it as well. And by the way, Mark English's, you know, form as well in these Europeans, I think, is something to be praised as well. But like, we're seeing Daniel Kilgallen, who you've probably noticed in Carl Den, he mentions anyway, but like if Ray Dempsey got the Mayo job, there's talk that Daniel Kilgallen, that the sprints coach, could work with his group.
One second,
yeah. And can I just make a quick point, Daniel Kilgallen, because there's so many coaches and a lot of people.
We'll come
like
to
I mentioned Jeremy Lyons there. Yeah, go on, Joe. Go on.
Sorry, we'll come to that piece because he deserves a proper mention. We'll come to that Carl Denny piece in a second, just to give people a sense of what Cecil Johnson is saying.
Oh yeah,
about
it's lovely piece,
Adeleke, for instance, who's now, you know, doing it on world stage and is over in America. I mean, he remembers in Tala, as a young girl, you could see she was a special talent. She was only 11 when she first came to the club. She was trying lots of different events. It was only a few years ago that she was winning the long jump in the Dublin Championship and coming third in the high jump. She ran cross country that year too, which was 3,500 metres. She didn't specialise in sprints until she was 14.
She played basketball, she played badminton. Yeah. She was 6'1" at 15. You see, we mustn't forget that's her stature. Apart from everything else, she's gifted physically, but she's making the most of her gifts, and she's brilliant application and discipline and ambition. I love her ambition.
I take your point totally on the hyperbole maybe around the games. I think the real excitement is that in Adeleke and Olatunde, nobody is expecting them to win Olympic golds or Olympic medals necessarily, but just that for the first time in an age that we as Irish fans might have a presence in sprinting events.
Oh, of course, I understand that. You're so right.
That's key to it, Joe.
Tune in for the good stuff.
Yeah.
Those are the events we'd never expected.
Yes, you're so right. Yeah, that's all right.
That is the bottom line.
And also,
because we've been watching 50k walks and 400-metre hurdles. And
I don't have the attention span.
Those are the events we'd normally focus on.
Well, and also, you're right. 5,000s and 10.
Never think of having an interest in the sprint final.
Exactly, and also, as you say, it's not as nerve-wracking too. 10,000, 5,000 metres, we watched Sonia for years on the distance events, and by the time you get to the end of them, you're a wreck, as apart from watching them. That's so true about that. And also their attitude is so positive and so charismatic and so ambitious. So ambitious that they have no qualms about thinking, I can be the best in the world. I just love that. Olatunde's attitude is fantastic. I mean, I knew hers was really good, but his is fantastic as well.
So just to mention, we can't do any story without a Mayo man involved somewhere. So this is page 10-11 of the Sunday Independent. So we've mentioned these two superstar sprinters, and a man who deserves huge credit is Daniel Kilgallen. He's from Ballina, County Mayo. And effectively, he has, at different points, coached both Adeleke and Olatunde, and Adeleke's gone on to...
He kind of inherited Olatunde more. Yeah, exactly.
She's gone on to the States, and now he's worked with Olatunde and brought him up to speed. And I suppose what jumps out about the interview is the point you've made, which is that effectively, you know, there's a real wing and a prayer policy here in Irish sport that we should be aware of. This guy is doing this for basically no money. Like he does a bit of work with DCU, and he's now been given a very short-term contract with Athletics Ireland. But his work with these two superstars that we've been praising is effectively volunteer work, and he makes, you know, his money by doing, as Cliona said, if Ray Dempsey gets in as Mayo manager, he might work with the team and get some money that way. But in effect, we don't have a policy here. This is just, we're very lucky that he's given up his time and that he came in contact with these athletes and he was able to do it. But even he talks about the demands of the job. He got quite emotional at one stage on Friday in Munich when he was talking to Carl Denny, who wrote this piece, and how his wife Cliona is at home. She's a full-time job. He's got children. He said, you get upset because you feel so bad. You're here worrying about check marks, but my wife has a full-time job, 2 kids. A lot of coaches wander around with guilt because we're affecting other areas of our life. It can get overwhelming, And at the end of every season, you see it in a lot of coaches' faces. So kind of an amazing insight into what he's done. And he talked about how with Adeleke, she had injuries, so he had to completely redo her form. That's so she wouldn't be as susceptible to injuries. And Olatunde as well. He had to, as the piece says, his ego had to take the hits as girls outpaced him in sessions of 300 metre reps, but he stuck at it, and they worked through, 2020 where the pandemic was on, and he's matured and he's got up to speed. But what just jumped out to me more than anything, Cliona, is that point that this guy, Daniel Kilgallen, has obviously done a very good job with these two new superstars.
Yeah.
Why is he not employed somewhere in the Irish infrastructure?
Yeah, you could say the same about Phil Healy's coach, Shane McCormack, Jeremy Lyons, Phelan Kelly. A lot of these people who... Jerry Kiernan before them, and Derval O'Rourke's coaches never got a penny. All of that. Our problem has always been that, like, we'd go to major championships and you'd see an army of coaches with the British team, and there are loads of them all paid, and the money wasn't here, the size of the country isn't there. But there is definitely at this point, and they've always argued this, that there has to be a way to support coaches to do this job professionally. Certainly to be able to give them the money to allow them to go around the world, which some of them do at their own cost, to learn from other coaches, because that's basically what they're doing at the moment, and a lot of them are just juggling, voluntary coaches who juggle with a full-time job, and this is a jump that Ireland has to make, I think, in a lot of sports, not just in athletics, but it is like, who pays the coaches? Because you can't be depending forever, and if you're in this altitude, if you're reaching this altitude with young athletes, how will we help the coaches to maintain their expertise and to keep moving along with them, and what I love about them is their attitude. And I know you probably both have seen this before. You get coaches before who were very minding their athlete, wouldn't share information. I mean, Daniel Kilgallen did an interview on Off the Ball during the week, and he gave credit to every single person who was working with his athletes and the previous coaches who worked with them. I think the man Fox was the man who used to coach Rashid out in Tala originally. I think Daniel Fox might be his name, I could have that wrong. So I love that attitude. They're now collaborating, these young coaches, they're sharing information, they're willing to work together, they're willing to let athletes work together, and that has been missing in Irish athletics for a long time, and I think there's a big sea change in attitude there with the coaches, but they need support probably.
They do, and Kieran,
have to find that money. You look at, I passed the new Children's Hospital, Joe, sorry for interrupting you today.
That's been good value.
Which has, exactly, and I'm just thinking, imagine if you just got 1 million of that and could put that into coaching for Irish sports, Irish coaches.
Beg the question, Kieran, when we see the funding going to sports, I suppose, like GAA, which can very much stand on their own 2 feet if we have things out of kilter?
Well, I think it brings up the whole issue of funding across the board, because politicians love funding where, they can be seen to give a check to a star name, or they can cut the ribbon at a new impressive facility, whereas the Institute of Sport or the Aquatic Centre or whatever. But putting money into coaching doesn't give you a photo op.
No.
And it might take years for it to put their fruition, but it's the most fundamental investment that's needed now in Irish sport. That across the board, so many talented Irish coaches, from hockey to boxing, are now working overseas because they can't get a full-time job here. And it says a lot that the supposedly amateur sports in the GAA can give some income to some of these coaches when they go in and help out. But in their own sports, they can't make a penny, or they struggle to make anything out of it. And there are quality coaches in Ireland now, far better quality than were there in the past. And they're doing it as a hobby because they have no choice. And it's not right, and it should be supported. But I don't see any will I've never seen a will from any sports minister to make that happen.
And they can make a living, which is the point you were making earlier, Joe. They can actually make a living as professional coaches, particularly in the S&C area and all that kind of area, and trainers in team sport here, because team sport, there's money in team sport, but they actually can't do it in a lot of individual sports. And you even look at somebody like Jack Woolley, his coaches, I think he works as an architectural technician or something, voluntary. A lot of our Olympic athletes, their coaches are voluntary across a load of sports.
I suppose connected in some ways, Sarah Keane is interviewed in Life magazine in the Sunday Independent. So Sarah Keane is a very prominent figure in Irish sport over the last number of years. She was a solicitor. She became CEO of Swim Ireland in 2004. And in the wake of the fallout from the Rio Games and the departure of Pat Hickey, she became president of the Olympic Federation. And so she's interviewed here by Emily Hurricane. It's very much a profile piece. So, for instance, the conversation we've just had about funding or policy, none of that is really talked about here. And maybe that's fair enough. This is more of a profile piece about someone who's having an extraordinary career, really. And that's the jumping off point in this interview. Sarah Keane has the kind of CV that inspires respect, certainly, perhaps a little envy, and definitely a degree of how is the opener. She's been CEO of Swim Ireland for almost 20 years, during which time the organisation has gone from just 2 employees to a staff of 39 with a revenue of 4.5 million. She's president of the Olympic Federation of Ireland, on the board of the Central Bank, and a talented swimmer who has represented Ireland at water polo. She also has 3 children. So that's pretty impressive, I think you would have to say. And I suppose, Clean, the main thrust of the article as it navigates through Keane's career is really her expanding on the juggling act that all is.
Yeah, and also, which I didn't probably realise a bit about her, and she's a very powerful figure in Irish sport. I mean, one of the most important people really as President of the Olympic Federation, and very involved in the International Olympic Federation, and also because of the whole restructuring of Irish swimming and the Olympics as well. But what struck me about it is there's just one line in it. I just think it's really, really important, and which is she says, people ask, I get asked, how do you... Well, first, I didn't realise she kind of accidentally fell into a lot of these things. It wasn't as strategic as I thought. She's a very strategic person. But the other thing is, she's asked, how do you manage everything? You know, how do you... And she says, the way I manage everything is by failing at some things. And that can affect your confidence. And I think that's a really interesting thing, because it applies to athletes and it applies to coaches. Very often coaches have this dilemma of... which is exactly what Daniel Gallen said. You feel guilty about neglecting one area of your life, particularly your children's lives or whatever. And she says you fail at some things, and you have to accept that you're not going to do everything perfectly. So I thought that was really good. And then she talks as well about making time for yourself. And there's a great line that she was going out one night for a swim, and her 5-year-old said, "You're going out again." And she said, "I almost didn't leave. I was about to come back in." And the other half said to him, "No, hang on a second. Did you go swimming earlier in the week? Who brought you? Mammy. And you're going to football tomorrow, and who's bringing you? Mammy. Do you not think Mammy should be able to go and do her own session?" And the 5-year-old said, "Mammy, go and have a good session." And like for athletes and coaches, you have to have really good support structures yourself to make that decision to say, "Oh, I'm going to go and get that qualification, and I'm going to really pursue and become a really good technical coach," which is what we need in all our sports. You have to make those hard decisions, but also you have to be afraid not to fail. And she has another great line that she said, she's talked about taking on the Olympic job and why did she take it on, and Emily Horan says to her, that was a brave move. And she says, I guess it was brave. That's one of the things that I ask myself now as I look back and as I'm getting older. Can you continue to be brave? It's harder to be brave as time goes on.
Yeah. I
think that happens to a lot of people with age.
For sure.
In sport as well as everything else. Even when you're managing teams, the younger you are, the better risk taking you are.
Less to lose.
Yeah, less to lose.
Yeah. I remember Oisin McConnell talking about that once, and he said, as you get older, you realise things can go wrong.
Yeah.
Whereas you've no fear when you're younger. And I don't think, you see that with the likes of Adeleke all the Sunday, that everything's great this week. Adeleke talked about being injury free all year. She had 51 races. Like next year, who knows what could happen?
That's phenomenal.
These things knock you back.
Yes.
Like that's why Ciara McGeehan had to come through so much.
Yeah.
So many knockbacks, and and the fact that she's put a huge amount of work into her sports psychology with Katie Kirk, because she had to get mentally stronger, because she had to deal with all those setbacks. And I think, Sarah Healy has started that process, and I think it'll stand her down the line. But generally, and I sometimes see it with a lot of athletes in different sports, the best days come early, and that could be down to a lack of fear at a younger age.
Sarah Keane's background, I know you two are familiar with it. I wasn't au fait with everything. Like, there's a great scene where her dad phoned her and said, "You haven't filled out your CEO form."
Yeah, I didn't know that actually. Yeah,
she's like, "Well, can you fill it out for me?" And got very angry at her and saying, "This is your future." So she stuck down law, figured it, wouldn't be too bad. And she's asked about her career, and I love that she said, "I think I'm very lucky." educated.
Yeah.
I think anyone who does anything really in life has had a fair degree of luck. And she said, I feel very privileged. And she went to UCD, swimming scholarship in Ohio. Life was very different. This was 30 years ago. I learned an awful lot about life. It was amazing. I'd almost never seen a black person. Cleveland is 60% black. Condoms were freely available in the dorms. I came from a very Catholic Ireland to the States, where I met people who were choosing their religion. That alone, in a way, it was probably a sensory overload in a year. She came back.
But there's the bravery. She had a 4-year scholarship and she quit it after a year.
That she knew that she wanted to live in Ireland, so obviously
that's a big decision.
A law degree here more applicable, and
yeah,
just very interesting stuff.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because I think what that whole bravery thing and that not being afraid to fail, I think that applies to athletes and coaches and administrators. And it's so important. We often talk about governance as well. That comes the whole way through sport, really.
And she said something about the guilt that I think, mothers in particular probably feel.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
She had a great line that her mother worked very hard and was often away. And she, of that guilt, because I suspect maybe mothers now of a generation who are working full-time for the first time are feeling that guilt. But Sarah Keane's mother was away a lot. And what she said was, I always saw that and always saw it in a positive way. It gave me confidence when I decided I wanted to keep